They exiled him for having the weakest crest, a digging skill seen as useless. Banished to a rocky island, alone, doomed to die. Finally, his skills will come in handy, and the land itself seems to be waiting for him. They thought the island was empty, but they were wrong. It was watching. Was he really cast aside, or just placed exactly where they needed him? Let's find out. This story begins in the kingdom of Sanfaris, on Heel's birthday. There was a celebration in the kingdom on this occasion. King Rui called the protagonist to him, addressed him by name, and noted that he, his son, the 17th prince, was celebrating his 15th birthday today. The king added that he had already become an adult, and to celebrate this day, he would grant him his own domain. Heel was sweating from the strain. The father continued that he should go to this land and heal it. After some time, the protagonist set off. He looked at the map. He needed to get to Sheol Reef. Having examined the route, the protagonist exclaimed, "Were they joking with him or something? It would take 10 days to row a boat to this place to reach the capital. Even pirates do not live here, and there are no merchants at all. This island is too far from the capital." He also noted that the island looked more like a large stone. The protagonist saw that the ship accompanying him was sailing back. This outraged him. Were they not even going to make sure that he had swum to the island in one piece? Having reached the place, he cursed. There was not even a beach here. And where was he supposed to moor? But be angry. Do not be angry. It was now his duty. The possessions of the 17th prince of the kingdom. At that moment, his brother, the 11th prince named Valpas, said that this reef was just right for him. To be more precise, it suited him perfectly. The protagonist's sister, the 9th princess named Talia, replied that it sounded interesting. The protagonist remembered the day of his birth, when his father gave him the island. He knew that he really did not have very good abilities, even bad ones. But there was another reason why everyone laughed at him. It was the coat of arms. Every person is born with a coat of arms. His brothers have strong and beautiful coats of arms. For example, God of the Sword and King of the Sword. And the power equal to the crests. And if you compare the crests of his brothers with his crest, you can see that he had an unknown crest, the meaning of which they still cannot understand. No matter how much he worked on himself, he could not activate it. His father and brothers were outraged by this situation, since he brought shame to the royal family. The day the king gave him his island, the protagonist asked him, with all due respect to his father's decision, could he not send his representative there to manage this reef? The king answered him that this is a task for him. This is the word of the oracle. You can say that he was essentially banished from the kingdom. Moreover, banished to some uninhabited mountain of stones. The protagonist began to think that it would be better to be executed for treason to the kingdom. He tried to calm down. He should not think like that. It was too early for him to die. The protagonist looked at the shore again, noticed one place where he could moor. He needed to slow down the boat so as not to crash into the rocks. He activated the magic wind. Seagulls were flying over him at that moment. One of them was caught in a gust of wind, and a feather from the bird fell in front of him. With the help of magic, he stopped the current of the boat and carefully moored his floating craft. The protagonist thought that this was the real power of his magic. When wind magic is activated, a strong gust of wind is called, but for the protagonist, everything was the opposite. Having moored the boat, he exhaled that he managed to land softly on the shore. He decided that first, he needed to drag his things to a safer place. Having gone ashore, he dragged his luggage, looked around, and saw a cave. Looking into it, he was shocked. Inside the cave lay a lot of human remains. He was shaking from what he saw, and he examined the cave more carefully. There was nothing else in it. The protagonist decided to move his supplies here. There was certainly nothing else suitable on this island. Having finished, he sat down on the chest and bowed his head dejectedly. Then he looked at the sea. The water surface was calm, and only the white caps of the waves leisurely beat against the shore. The protagonist thought that this was a wonderful place. It was far from the bustle of the capital. If only the situation were a little different. Despair and hopelessness seized him. Then he shook his head, driving away sad thoughts from it, and firmly decided that he was going to survive here, no matter what. He thought that when a ship sailed by, he would ask them for help. The ship could not be from his country, so only foreign or pirate ships could sail here. But if so, then at best, he would become a slave. There were no trade routes here, and this reef was too far from the capital for anyone to fish here. But first, he needed to sort out some things. The food and water he had brought with him would last for a month at most. He could not rely on his magic, so he needed to store rainwater and fish in barrels. The protagonist looked at the skeletons and noted that he also needed to clean up this cave and bury these remains. The protagonist took a pickaxe out of the chest and decided to try digging with it. Suddenly, a voice said that he had received a mining tool. Gil was amazed. What was that? It was as if he heard that voice in his head. He turned to it to ask it to say something else. The voice repeated that he had received a mining tool. It asked the protagonist, did he want to start mining? MC thought in surprise that there was no doubt that he had heard right. He asked the voice who he was. The voice replied that he was the Crest, king of the cave. His function was an advisor. He was not a living organism. The protagonist looked at his hand with the seal in amazement and saw that the crest on his hand was glowing with a soft light. He wondered if King of the Cave was the crest he was born with. He asked him why he appeared now. He guessed it himself. King of the Cave, of course. After all, he always lived in the royal palace and never even came close to the cave. At that moment, a system window appeared, which informed the protagonist that in addition to the advisor function, the voice increases the mining skill and provides support. Inside the cave, the protagonist can raise his level in different ways. The protagonist said that he should wait, not talk so much, and better yet, let him stop for now. The voice stopped the system window. The protagonist did not understand anything. What if he said he wanted to start mining? The voice told him no problem. Mining optimization done. The protagonist was surprised. Optimization? At that moment, one of the walls lit up with a bright light. Heel wondered why the wall was shining like that. The voice explained to him that in those places where it shines with white light, there are the most suitable fragments for mining. They are easy to dig and there will be no risk of collapse. The protagonist chuckled and decided to start from the place that was closer to him. Having hit once, he was surprised. So much material broke off from one light blow. So far, everything was going as the advisor said. He noticed that it was so light here, although he was in a cave. Heel asked the voice, was this one of the supporting effects? The voice told him that it was the effect of night vision. The protagonist said that then everything was fine. He will start by freeing up a place for himself to sleep. With each blow, the stone fragments fell in large piles. The protagonist turned to his advisor and noted that it was quite funny. So, step by step, he punched a fairly spacious place. He wondered if the amount he could dig up at once was increasing. He had already dug up a lot of stones. The voice answered him that the amount he could dig up increased as his mining skills increased. The protagonist wanted to say something about improving his abilities, but at that moment his foot tripped on a stone and he almost fell. The voice asked him if he should extract 168 stones. The protagonist was surprised. Extract what? The advisor answered that it didn't matter how much he could extract, his crest could store it in countless quantities. Heel wondered, where would he put the stones? The advisor couldn't answer him. The protagonist continued digging. The voice said that the storage didn't affect his body in any way. He could extract what he dug up at any time. MC thought he understood him. At that moment, the air vibrated and the stones began to move in mid-air. A voice informed him that 168 stones had been extracted. Now, it was a construction tool. The system window showed him the number of stones extracted. The protagonist could not contain his surprise. The voice asked him if he should activate the automatic search. Heel was not against it. He exclaimed that at this rate, he would reach the other side. He should dig deeper. The advisor informed him that he was 10 meters from where he started. MC was amazed. Meters? He had never heard of such a thing. He probably should know what 1 meter is. Just like that, before he knew it, his inventory was full of stuff. The protagonist noted the copper and bronze ores, and was surprised he even had gold ore. He definitely had no use for gold on a desert island. But he didn't know what magic ore was. The voice informed him that the mining guide had been activated. Magic stone increases the user's magic power. The larger the stone, the stronger the power increase effect. Heel asked him in surprise, does this stone increase magic power? That means even his pathetic magic could gain power? He had so many problems during all this time. The protagonist asked the advisor what a turtle stone was. The system gave a message that by using this stone he could increase his lifespan by 1 day. Heel thought that he had read it wrong. Lifespan? The protagonist thought about it. He had no idea what a cave king was, but this crest was simply amazing. And this Sheol reef turned out to be a pretty good domain, right? Well, it was time for him to start mining. He completely forgot about the idea of searching for ships that could save him. He continued to dig and mine. In the blink of an eye, he reached a depth of 30 meters. Now in his inventory, there were 1,230 stones, 21 copper ore, 19 bronze ore, 0.6 gold ore, 2 silver ore, 15 coal, 10 lime. In addition to all this, there was 0.3 ruby, 0.2 sapphire, 90 magic stone, and 6 turtle stone. He was most interested in the magic and turtle stones, especially the magic one. It would be nice if he could use more advanced magic. The voice immediately asked him if he should use 90 magic stones. The protagonist agreed to this. He was very interested in how all this would turn out for him. The advisor informed him that the use was successful. The protagonist listened to himself, even tried to make some passes, but he did not feel anything unusual in himself. He asked the voice if he had already used the magic stones. The advisor answered that he had. Gil was wondering, doesn't anything happen to the body when stones are used? Then he just decided to test it out. He just needed to clear the path he dug. He concentrated and activated his wind skill. A whirlwind of such force arose that everything that was lying on the ground, including the remains, rose into space and instantly disappeared somewhere. MC couldn't believe his eyes. He did it? Did 90 stones raise his magic level that much? Everything around him, one could say, simply shone with purity. There were no stones or skeletons. At that moment, he heard some kind of sound. Something incomprehensible jumped on his chest and dropped him. He stared at this creature in surprise and thought, what is it? The creature looked like a slime. The next morning, the protagonist laid out his inventory. It had been 3 days since he, the 17th prince of the Sanfaris kingdom, received a quest, or rather, banished to the Rocky Mountains, known as the Sheol Reefs. He packed his backpack, noting that he had his tools and food with him. Now, they were about to begin another day of mining. He called out to his new friend, and beckoned for him to follow him. The protagonist saddled Shell, and they galloped off towards their new prey. So, the protagonist named his new friend Shell. It was unclear what gender he was, but the protagonist addressed him as a male. He was his first companion. When he appeared in the cave 3 days ago and jumped on his chest, the protagonist was amazed. As his surprise subsided, the protagonist noted that he had read about it. It was a slime. Did it jump out because the wind magic scared it? The voice meanwhile said that a tameable monster had been found. The system was asking the protagonist if he should tame it. Hill knew that taming was a skill that made monsters follow their master, but he had never seen it used. It didn't work on hostile monsters. In any case, monsters were hated in his kingdom and were destroyed when any were found. Meanwhile, the system said that taming should be used, but no tameable targets were found. The protagonist thought that it was in the kingdom, but in this place, no one would judge him for trying to tame a monster. The system asked the MC to name the monster to complete the taming process. Hill thought about it, because he came to this island from the reef, so he named him Shell. He said that from now on his name is Shell. The system announced that the naming was complete. Shell was tamed. The protagonist sat down in front of him and said that he was pleased to meet him. It was obvious that the slime didn't understand human speech, but having another living creature next to him made him feel better. After taming it, the protagonist returned to his occupation. Here's what he thought at the beginning. Now Shell. His new friend watched the protagonist, then took the form of a pedestal and lifted Heel onto himself. MC was surprised. Wow. Shell turned out to be surprisingly smart. The protagonist thanked him for his help and noted that now he can reach even such a height. The protagonist used gestures to tell the slime what he wanted, and thanks to this, his mining began to progress faster. In the last 3 days, the amount of things he dug up tripled. He used about 500 magic stones. With his enhanced magic, food was no longer a problem. The protagonist made himself a nest. He even had his own soft bed, and Shell acted as a pillow and massager, kneading the protagonist's sore shoulders, which Heel felt just great about. He found 10 more slimes while digging. To be honest, he didn't think it would be easy for him to communicate with them. It seemed that Shell was special. The protagonist decided to ignore them, as long as they didn't get in his way. So they decided that tomorrow he would continue digging. The next morning, the protagonist woke up and wished his friend a good morning. Shell was jumping around its owner. Heel wondered why he was doing this. Then he realized that he was trying to show something. The protagonist saddled his friend and he carried him to the seashore. What the protagonist saw there made him completely amazed. Green-skinned goblins were lying motionless on the shore. There was debris from a floating craft lying next to them. The protagonist realized that their boat had crashed into the rocks and they had been washed up on the rocky shore. Heel went down, approached the largest goblin, examined him and noticed that he was alive. What was to be done? Officially, humans and goblins were enemies. Most humans would immediately think of destroying the goblins. The goblins themselves would do the same. Shell gestured that they could not be left here. Despite all the prejudices of high society, there was no one else here except them, and the protagonist would not feel good if he left the goblins here to die. He told his friend to calm down and activated his healing ability. When he was done, he and Shell dragged the wounded into the cave where they laid them down. Their lives were now safe. The protagonist left his friend to watch the guests. He asked him to let him know if there was any change in their condition. The protagonist himself went into the mine. Was he careless? What if they woke up and attacked him? But then again, he could use mid-level magic now, so he hoped he would be okay. Although, he was still getting anxious. Heel decided to throw himself into digging, the only way he could calm down. Taking up the work, he repeated to himself to dig further and more. The stones only had time to fly in different directions. He sat down to rest, and noted that mining was wonderful. It made him forget about everything else. He felt very good when he checked his inventory. MC decided to check if there were new stones. He saw that 2 new stones had been added to his production. Shining Stone 4.5, it was a stone that did not lose its shine. The protagonist thought that he had night vision, just in case. The second stone was called Misogi. It was in 1 quantity, and removed all types of curses. The protagonist grinned. There was no one here who could curse him, so Heel decided that it did not matter. But finding new things was nice. He continued digging. At that moment, Shell came to him. The protagonist asked him, were the goblins awake? He sat on his friend, and he instantly carried him to the place where the goblins were. Stopping in front of the entrance to the room where their guests were, the protagonist and Shell heard General Elvon begging Princess Rihanna to let him go. Rihanna called for him to stop. He couldn't just eat someone else's food. Varys agreed with the princess. They had to talk it over first. The allies decided to come out of their hiding place. The general jumped up, grabbed his knife and growled, "Who's there?" Rihanna ordered him to put his weapon away. This man saved them. Elvon resisted. He couldn't do it. The man was very dangerous. The protagonist was surprised. Did they speak the same language as him? Were they from the Balian continent too? He tried to tell the general to stop. He didn't plan on doing anything to them. Elvan shouted at him to stay back. Does he think a goblin can trust a man? The protagonist had a feeling that they weren't exactly hostile, but rather afraid of him. The general noticed that he was up to something. MC smiled stupidly at the absurdity of the situation. Elvan continued, if he was not up to anything, then why was he making fun of them? The protagonist was surprised and looked at his friend. Shell instantly took the form of a mirror. The protagonist looked at his reflection and thought that, indeed, this guy looks very dangerous. Heel exclaimed for them to all calm down. He was so carried away by digging that he became something inhuman. He agreed that he looked creepy now. He apologized to the goblins and offered them this food. With these words, he activated the abilities of lightning and wind, and a fish appeared in front of the guests. Heel asked them with a smile, do they see? They can eat this fish he caught together. The general was surprised. If he can use such magic, then why didn't he kill them? Let him do it quickly. At this moment, the princess wanted to say something to Elvan, but suddenly lost consciousness. Her attendants rushed towards her, shouting her name and status, and begged her to wake up. The protagonist asked in amazement, her wounds had not healed? Shaman Varys told him that the reason was that their princess was cursed with a life-shortening curse. Heel thought in surprise, a curse? The princess woke up at that moment and in a quiet voice asked the general for forgiveness. Her time had come. Elvan exclaimed that they could not let the princess die alone. They would die with her. The shaman said that he was right, otherwise they would receive punishment in the afterlife. Heel was amazed. Were they going to kill themselves? He shouted at them to stop. The protagonist told them that he could extract the poison from the prince's body. The general irritatedly told him not to lie to them. They had already tried everything. Heel told him that he had the Misogi stone. He had not used it before, but now his time had come. The voice informed him that the Misogi stone had been used. The princess began to emit a soft, bright light. The protagonist noticed that her lifespan had also been shortened. He had 89 turtle stones in his supply. He told the voice that they would keep 10 stones for themselves and use the rest. The advisor immediately informed him that 79 stones had been used. Meanwhile, the general and the shaman looked at the princess in surprise. Elvan asked the protagonist what kind of light this was. The protagonist answered that it was Misogi's stone that cured Rihanna's curse. The goblin was surprised. The stone? Where did he get it? The protagonist was about to answer him, but at that moment, the general stared at something in surprise. When the protagonist and the shaman followed his gaze, they were also amazed. The princess was sitting on the ground, alive and well. She looked at them with a puzzled look and asked them what happened. She thought she was dead. The general threw himself at Heel's feet and began to ask for forgiveness. For what he had done to the princess's savior, how could he apologize to him? The protagonist answered him that they could go to the food and eat something. He noticed that they had not even met each other yet. The protagonist looked at the place where Elvan had bowed to him and was surprised. He had broken the ground with his head. Yes, the goblins were scary. Elvan spoke again. He did not know how to apologize to Heel, so that he would forgive him. Then he introduced himself to him, and after him, the princess and the shaman introduced themselves to the protagonist. The princess turned out to be the daughter of the Goblin King named Roden. All three belonged to the Belden tribe. The protagonist told them that his name was Heel. He was, the prince of the kingdom of Sanfalis. Elvan exclaimed, a prince? Now he understood why he could use all that magic they saw. The protagonist countered that it was all because of the stones he dug up. But it didn't matter. He asked them why they were here. Elvan frowned and told him that their hometown had been burned to the ground by the orcs. Almost the entire ruling family had been killed. Only the princess had survived. They had been looking for a place to live for the past year, but the other clans had not accepted them. The shaman added that the humans had certainly driven them away. They and the other survivors had set out for the new world, but they didn't even know if the others were safe. That decrepit ship they were sailing on had given up. The princess asked Varys not to blame Elvin. She added that if they had stayed on land, their fate would have been the same. Varys agreed that she was right and apologized. Rhianna turned to the protagonist and thanked him for saving monsters like them. He thought, monsters. Out loud, he said that everything was fine, they didn't have to worry about it. The princess said she knew that she wouldn't live long anyway. And yet, that pain in her chest disappeared. She was glad that now she could die in peace. The protagonist replied that it was too early for them to give up. There were still turtle stones. There were a lot of them underground. They could extend her life as long as they wanted. As long as they had them, there was hope. The general, not believing his ears, asked him, "Was it true?" The protagonist remarked that if he dug at this speed for a whole week, he thought he could get more than a year. That is, the stones, he meant. The general and the shaman looked at each other in surprise. Then Elvon said he knew that he was asking too much, but would he let them dig too? The protagonist smiled and told him that of course he would allow them to do so. The general thanked him profusely for his help. The princess asked the protagonist why he was giving them something so precious. Gil told her not to worry, he was only digging because he enjoyed it. And he was lonely alone. Rian's eyes welled up with tears and she thanked the protagonist for his kindness. Meanwhile, MC thought this was indeed a small matter. But what next? He had ice axes, but if they dug somewhere strange, they might get a cave-in. The voice told him that he could bestow part of the blessing from his effects on the monsters he tamed. The associated effects were improved mining, increased experience, and optimized digging. The goblins asked him again, "Tame them?" Heel explained to them that this way they could dig together. They could refuse, he did not insist. He will dig himself and give them as many turtle stones as they want. The general protested, No, he and Varys will serve him. The shaman confirmed his words but asked the princess not to do anything. Rhianna passionately expressed her desire to serve Lord Heel. The shaman and the general wanted to dissuade her, but Rhianna firmly answered them that she cannot just sit and let others work for her. Besides, she would like to somehow repay the protagonist for his care and kindness. Elvin still tried to stop her once more, but the girl did not listen to him. She turned to Heel and asked him to give her a new name. A voice told him that a tameable monster was found. Tame it? The protagonist thought that she did not need to worry so much. Well, if she wanted, she could always stop. He agreed to change the princess's name. The general addressed him as a boss and assured him that from this day forward, he, Elvin, would protect him. The voice noted that the general was tamed. The shaman noted that it was an honor for him. He, Varys, would also serve the protagonist for as long as his advanced age would allow. The voice noted that Varys was also tamed. The protagonist suggested a new name for the princess, Rhianna. He asked her what she thought of it. She repeated her new name and told him that she promised Rhianna would offer him everything she had. The voice said that Rhianna was tamed too. In the end, they went underground after they finished eating. Heel thought, honestly, he just wanted to get back to mining. His new allies did not have night vision, so he made a simple stone torch for them. The general wondered where it came from. The protagonist told him that it was in his inventory. He will teach them while they dig. Along the way, Elvin noticed that the cave glowed in some places. The princess said that it was very beautiful. The protagonist explained to them that these were places where they could safely dig. He would show them. Approaching the right wall, he hit the pickaxe and told them that it was done like this. The protagonist was so carried away by his favorite business that for a while, he forgot about his assistants and how they could be amazed by his magic. Remembering them, he stopped and told them that he usually did not start like this. He thought that when they got used to it, they would be able to dig like this. Heel noticed that the stones were not collected automatically. He turned to Shell and asked him if he could give instructions to the other slimes. His ally assured him that he would do it. The protagonist exclaimed that this was good. Let them just try. Practice makes perfect. From that day on, the cave became much more lively. After some time, after another dig, the protagonist sat down on the rocks, closed his eyes, and thought deeply. He remembered the incident when he tried to save a creature in the form of a small dragon named Lopez, who was sitting on a leash. Then his younger brother, Oren, with his company came up to them, and laughing, he addressed him as a weakling, and noted that he should get out of his way. The protagonist then shrank, but still covered the dragon with himself. The brother grinned, and added that they were both weaklings. He activated his crest on his hand, and asked them if he should turn them both into ashes. And even then, the protagonist did not move from the spot. Now, he squeezed the vial hanging on his chest and heard the princess call out to him. He came out of his thoughtful state. Rihanna asked him if he was okay. Elvan asked him if he was probably tired. He had already dug a lot today. The protagonist reassured his allies by telling them that he was just thinking about something. And thanks to the king of the cave, he could dig all day without getting tired. The princess asked him not to overwork himself. He assured her that everything would be so. Then he asked what smelled so delicious. Rihanna smiled and answered that they would have apple pie today. All three, the MC, the general, and the shaman, were amazed. Heel thought, in fact, 3 days had passed since he met the goblins. Since then, they had made a few things. These were a bathroom, a reservoir, and a simple kitchen. Thanks to her, he could eat the food prepared by the princess. He bit into a piece of apple pie and froze, enjoying the taste of this dish. The protagonist closed his eyes in pleasure and said that it was so delicious. The princess, excitedly, answered that she was very glad that he liked it. She was eager to please him. Thanks to Rihanna, the food he brought with him was not simply boiled or baked but turned into delicious food. Elvan remarked that he would never have thought that mining could be so fun. The shaman supported him, that he was right. He added that it was all worth it, because they were prolonging the princess's life. Rihanna turned to all three and thanked them for their concern. The protagonist thought that the situation was gradually improving, but there were still a lot of other things to do. He did not have the necessary resources. After the firewood ran out, he would only be able to count on what he brought with him. There was no food on this island except fish, and their clothes would gradually wear out over time. He muttered that it was unlikely, but if a ship did appear, they could exchange emeralds for supplies. No, who would have thought that he would have the same worries as a real lord of the lands? At that moment, Elvan told him that if he wanted to continue digging, then he should let him do it too. The protagonist objected. They should rest. He himself thought that for now, he just needed to dig. He wanted more turtle stones for Rian, and maybe find some new stones. Continuing to work, the protagonist after a while chiseled a gaping hole. He was surprised. What was it? It was a cave. The protagonist entered it and exhaled in amazement. What kind of stones were these? They were as orange as the sunset. They were clearly different from the shining stones. Heel also noticed that there was something soft under his feet. Sitting down, he noticed in surprise, is this dirt? But why was it here? The protagonist heard some sound and raised his head. What he saw took his breath away. Right in front of his eyes, hanging on a web, was a huge spider. The protagonist panicked. A spider? Was this monster going to eat him? He's definitely going to die here. But suddenly the creature turned around and ran away, which surprised the protagonist. Looking closely, he realized that the spider ran deep into the cave, and around this monster there were many small spiderlings. Heel guessed that the creature was protecting its children. The protagonist apologized to the spider, which meant that its nest was here. At that moment, a voice said that a tameable monster had been found. Tame it? Heel went back to his allies. Elvan, seeing it, exclaimed joyfully. He changed his mind, and he wants the general to go with him to get it. But at that very second, his eyes widened, and he shouted in horror to his boss that there was a monster behind him. MC apologized to them for scaring them. He added that behind him were Tirana and her children. They had just joined them. The shaman exclaimed, "A cave spider! Who knew there was such a big spider here?" Heel asked him, "Are the ones on the continent smaller?" Varys answered that they are. Usually, they are the same as him. Their web is stronger than iron, and they have very strong poison. They are very dangerous, and they also feed on people and monsters. The protagonist was surprised. People? Is it true what he says? He was told to be careful if there is dirt in the cave. It turns out that, in fact, this is the soil of cave spiders. The floor of the cave where he found them was covered with it. The shaman admitted that this was true. But this was good news. Heel was surprised. What good did he see in this? Varys said that the thing of spiders is better suited for growing crops than ordinary soil. This is the soil of cave spiders. It is full of nutrients. They can grow such a crop as mushrooms. The spider web mixed in it retains moisture in it. The protagonist noted that then it is so. The shaman confirmed that it was perfect for growing crops. Only Varys was worried about where to grow crops on an island full of rocks. Gil replied that he wanted to tell them something about that. He invited them to follow him because he wanted them to take a look at this tunnel he had discovered. When they arrived, the allies were amazed. Rihanna asked where this came from. Heel told her that the road was too narrow for Terran, so he widened it. At the same time, he tried out the new functions of his Cave King. When he was widening this tunnel, the system voice informed him that he had collected enough experience. The Cave King had been upgraded to level 2. Now it had access to new functions, such as design, workshop, and area of effect. Design gave him the ability to give any shape to things during mining. Here the protagonist noted that it was easier to walk on this ladder than on an uneven tunnel. The workshop allowed you to process and combine things in your inventory. The materials available for this were stone, sand, and gravel. The protagonist created a kitchen from this material, which delighted Rian, but the area of action limited it. All this could only be done inside the cave. Although the workshop and the ability to get things from the inventory were available outside the cave. The shaman asked Heal if he thought he could prepare the land. The protagonist answered him that he cannot use the design outside, but he can make gravel with the workshop and scatter it on the ground. The voice also added night vision for tamed monsters that day. So Elvin was surprised. It was so bright inside the cave. Does his boss see everything the same way? By the end of the day, the allies dived into the sea. Elvin said, "It looks like they will have more trouble from tomorrow." The shaman confirmed that this is true. They have a lot to do. The protagonist noted that all this is good. What about a welcoming party for Taran and her children? How are the preparations for tomorrow going? Rihanna replied that everything is in full swing. She will cook a lot of fried fish. So, the plan to change the island was approved. Elvan and Varys forged pickaxes. The shaman began to justify himself to the protagonist that he did not have enough knowledge to make the same as the original. Like the protagonist objected that this is not true. Making iron tools in a place like this is already a huge achievement. Rihanna knitted from spider webs. The protagonist tested the towel she knitted. He exclaimed in admiration that it was so soft. The princess giggled and said that if he wanted, she could make a futon too. The protagonist thought that he was using their things here. He appointed Taran as the head of agriculture, and suddenly, she showed an unexpected talent. She dug so fast that the protagonist could only be surprised. He thought that even the king of the cave could not take her lightly anymore. And then, they had one sprout. It grew so fast that in a matter of seconds it turned into an apple tree. The protagonist was surprised. He did not think that the effect would be so strong. Varys agreed with them. He added, "That's probably why Tirana is so huge." The protagonist thought the orange stones they found in that cave turned out to be sunstones. They accelerated the growth of living beings. He could not find them in other places, so he should take care of them. The protagonist turned to the princess. Is she busy? He entrusted the sunstones and the planning of the plantations to her. Rihanna was very nervous about this. She asked him if he was sure that he wanted to entrust her with something so valuable. She assured him that she would not let him down. Heel was worried that she worried too much, but because of this, he could trust her. Shell took the form of a car and whistled the protagonist down the tunnel. Eel thanked him, although he admitted that he was a little scared. He looked at his allies and thought that they were all doing what they did best. Thanks to this, he could devote himself entirely to mining. His goal was to get as many turtle stones as possible. Ryan already had 5 years of life, but she told him that she was 15 years old, just like him. And he was sure that she wanted to live a long life. He was the best miner, so he had to work harder. At that moment, something caught his attention. He was surprised to see an unfamiliar white stone. What was it? But first, he needed to dig it up. The system told him that this stone was a dragon sphere. It could resurrect the dead. Heel was amazed. Resurrect? The protagonist called his allies to him and asked them to dig with him. But no matter how much they dug, they could not find any more of these dragon spheres. Tired, they took a break, and the protagonist noted that it all made sense. It would be very scary to be able to resurrect everyone left and right. He said that he would take it outside. If he died, he would not be able to take it out of his inventory. At this moment, Elvan anxiously called him up. The protagonist was confused. Did something happen? He placed the white stone on a pile of ore, deciding to leave it there for now, and rushed up, asking the goblin what happened there. When the protagonist approached the general, Elvan excitedly told him that their clansman's ship was right there. Running outside, the protagonist asked him, "What? Really?" The general answered him that, without a doubt, it was so. Rihanna, the shaman, and Shell joined them. Indeed, they saw a ship on the sea. Varys made some kind of white flag and waved it, attracting the attention of those on the ship. The protagonist noticed that they had survived after all. The princess was happy. She also thought that they were already dead. Elvan was jubilant. This was wonderful. His daughter was on that ship too. The protagonist told him that it was too dangerous for the ship to dock here. He should take his ship. The goblin agreed with him. But was his boss sure of his decision? Heel answered that he was sure, because he didn't use it. He took out a bag of gems and told the goblins to take it with them. It was his parting gift to them. Thanks to this, they will be able to restore the Belden clan wherever they want. The goblins stared at him in amazement. Elvin asked him what their boss was talking about. The protagonist, in turn, was also surprised. What was he talking about? Their friends were there, on the ship. They should leave this remote place and join their tribesmen. It would be even better. They would start bargaining after they found a suitable place for a house. It would be great if he could get things from outside. The goblins looked at each other in confusion, then looked at the protagonist. Elvin asked him not to abandon them. The protagonist looked at them dumbfoundedly, like, "What?" El was indignant. "Leave him. Never." They were going there to the ship so that their tribesmen would also swear allegiance to him. They would never do such a thing. Rihanna noted that it was true. They were his subordinates. The amazed heel replied that he certainly appreciated it, but they would never have such a chance again. The princess asked him if he could go with them then? The protagonist wilted a little. To tell the truth, he had such a plan, but now, he and his Crest could not leave this place. Rihanna calmly answered him that then, they would stay too. Heel looked at their happy faces. He was deeply touched by their loyalty, and surprised at the same time. At that moment, a storm began at sea, and the ship began to sink. Elle was scared. This was bad. Most of them did not know how to swim. He takes the boat to save them. Varys and the princess rushed with him to the boat. The protagonist thought that they would not make it in time, and that small boat could only hold a couple of people. This was not good. Then, when his brother and his friends killed Lopez, he could not do anything. But now he would not allow innocent people to die again, so he ran and jumped straight into the sea. The goblins exclaimed in amazement, "Mr. Heel?" The protagonist thought that it was not hopeless. He could do it. He should remember that he, Heel, was the owner of his coat of arms, and he could use 8,879 stones. He turned to his coat of arms and called upon the ice ability. At that very moment, the raging water turned into ice. The goblins were in a state close to shock from what they had seen. The protagonist rejoiced. He had done it. This power was in such a quantity of stones. With it, he felt more confident. The protagonist shouted to Elvon to forget about the boat. Let him walk on the ice and save everyone who was there. The general immediately came to his senses from amazement, shouted back to Heel that he understood everything, and rushed along the icy road. But as soon as he stepped on the ice, it rolled and fell. The princess was worried about her ally. The protagonist cursed. He had made a road, yes, but it was slippery. A wonderful idea occurred to him. He called Taran for help. With her legs, she'll get to the ship in no time. Elle jumped on the spider's back, and Taran ran to the drowning people. The general said that he had never been good to spiders, but now he had changed his mind. Heel turned to Shell. He asked him to help save the victims with his friends. Everyone safely reached the ship, picked up all the drowning people, and returned to the shore. The protagonist canceled the activation of the ice skill, and the sea became the same again. The protagonist examined the victims. He healed those who needed it. The princess turned to him and said that, thanks to him, all 205 passengers on the ship were safe. Varys asked him how they could thank him. The protagonist replied that he saw that everyone was safe, and everything ended well. Elle grabbed a goblin girl named Full, hugged her, and joyfully exclaimed how good it was that she was alive. It was his daughter. She almost choked from his tight embrace. She asked him to let her go. It was so awkward. Varys explained to the surprised protagonist that Full was the general's daughter. And he looked so happy now. The protagonist thought that the girl probably looked more like her mother than Elvin. Rihanna noted, turning to the MC, that all the wounded and sick were feeling better thanks to his healing magic. She thanked their savior from the bottom of her heart. The protagonist was embarrassed. Maybe that was true, but he couldn't have done all this alone. He listed everyone who participated in the rescue and summarized that they all together saved the Beldun tribe. The protagonist smiled and thanked his allies for helping him save the drowning people. Varys turned to him and noted that he was too kind. He wanted to tell the protagonist what was on his mind, but the surprised protagonist interrupted him with a question. Who was behind him? Behind the shaman stood a strange old man with a thick beard. It was Mappa, and he was completely naked. Heel asked Varys and Rian who he was. Was he on the ship? The shaman said in surprise that he had not received such a report. He was also curious if the protagonist had ever encountered any cave. The protagonist answered that he had not seen one before either. But why was he naked? Heel introduced himself to the old man and asked him who he was. Mappa, turning away, silently wandered to the fire. Rian assumed that he was hungry and expressed a desire to fry more fish. Heel thanked her for her concern. Varys asked with interest who he was after all. The protagonist noted that now they should at least dress him. The next day, the protagonist began to expand. He shouted to the allies that this should be enough and told them to bring the stones inside. The main character's population increased by 205 people, so he prepared new rooms. One of the goblins noted that in the blink of an eye, it turned into a glorious room. The second goblin thanked the protagonist heartily. It was the 41st room for 5. He had tamed everyone in the Beldun tribe. The circumstances may not have been the best, but he was genuinely happy that the island had become much more lively. But they didn't have all the good news. They had found only a few supplies at the shipwreck, so they were very busy increasing the production of essentials and tools. Rihanna called out to the MC and told him that he had done a good job on the rooms. He thanked her and asked if she was okay. The princess replied that she was fine. She added that it might come as a surprise to him, but she had brought him something for him to try. Rihanna handed him a mug of a strange liquid. He noticed that the color and smell were familiar to him. He took a sip and exclaimed with delight that it was grapes. The princess replied that it was. She used the sunstone on a grape seed she found in the boat. The protagonist said that it was really cool. He never thought that he would drink fresh juice here. She replied that it was still a small plantation, but in a few years it would be full of fruits. The protagonist said in surprise. Years? She was already thinking about the future. He was sure that she could handle it. The protagonist told her that if she needed help, she could always tell him about it. The princess assured him that she would do her best. Suddenly, Heel heard one of the goblins asking Mappa what he wanted. All he did was stare. The goblin called him by name and told him to go and bother someone else. The MC asked in surprise, Mappa? That silent old man, Mappa? The princess told him that it was true. That's what everyone here calls him. Mappa, meanwhile, was examining the tools he had made, smirking skeptically. The goblin, whose tools he was examining, nudged him irritably and asked if his work was not good enough for him. He thrust a hammer into the old man's hands and told him to try it himself then. The old man silently took the tools he needed and began to sculpt his creation. He was doing it so deftly that the protagonist thought he was good at it. Mappa, not paying attention to anyone, was diligently creating something, and with such speed that everyone who was watching his work was amazed. In the end, the old man made a pickaxe, and the protagonist admired his work. The pickaxe was simply elegant and beautiful, like a work of art. Although, it would seem, it was just a tool. The protagonist thought, would this beautiful thing be able to break a stone? He took both picks in his hands and told his allies to see. In his right hand he had a regular pick, and in his left hand, the Mappa tool. As soon as he started testing, his doubts literally blew away. The old man's pick had dug several times more than a regular one. Heel was puzzled. It was made of regular iron, like the others. He asked the old man how he did it. Suddenly, the protagonist saw the place where he left the white stone. He asked everyone to wait and examine the place completely. He was sure that he had left the stone here, but now it was gone. The princess asked him what had happened. Heel asked in response, had they not seen a round stone here? In all this confusion, he had completely forgotten about it. Then he noticed the shape of one of the depressions, and was surprised to notice that the shape of this hole was interesting. Was it really someone's grave, or a sarcophagus? Could it be? And then it dawned on him. He hadn't noticed it because of the shadows of the rocks, but it looked like there were bones there. So the Dragon Ball had resurrected Mappa. The protagonist, surprised by his guess, noted that they could just be glad that they had another faithful comrade. After some time, thanks to Mappa's tools, they extended the shore. Then they dismantled the ship and began to rebuild it. They were successful in some things. In addition, they began to dig a lot more. They even found new slimes, and the protagonist tamed them. Now they helped with transportation. The protagonist would like to say that everything was going like clockwork for them. But there was something. They found fewer and fewer turtle stones. Rihanna, trying to calm her master, said with a smile that she thought she already had enough turtle stones. However, they only increased her lifespan by 10 years. He was sure that the princess wanted to live on. Shell watched his friend work, letting him know that he needed to rest. He couldn't do the impossible. The protagonist told him that it wasn't true. In fact, he was the one who wanted the princess to live longer. He wanted to dig more, develop the island, and live together with Rihanna. Suddenly he stopped and thought in amazement, a cave? Entering inside, he wondered, what is this? Is there a room down here? There was something on a pedestal near one of the walls. He thought it was just an uninhabited island. He looked at the pedestal and thought maybe something happened here a long time ago? He wanted to take the things he saw first. As soon as the protagonist reached out his hand to the pedestal, the system window notified him that it was a stone heart. It could become the basis for an artificial organism. Now you can create a doll using the stone heart. You can combine materials from your inventory to create a doll. Heel was surprised. A doll? So he can create a new comrade? Okay, he'll think about it later, but what is this golden stone? The system immediately told him that it was an evolution stone, allows the monster to evolve. The protagonist was amazed. He didn't know what that meant. The system told him that he could change the monster's species. The monster retains its age and personality, but its body changes. The protagonist became scared. Does the body change? Suddenly, an idea came to his mind. He brought his lute to the mine and told his allies everything. The shaman was surprised. An evolution stone? So this stone allows monsters to evolve? Heel asked him if he had heard of anything like that. Varus replied that it was true. Every goblin knows about it. It is described in their legends. Elvin thought about it. Now that the shaman mentioned it, he remembered at least something similar. Varus asked MC if he knew anything about species that are very similar to goblins. The protagonist asked him in bewilderment, did he mean hobgoblins and leaf goblins? The shaman noted, yes, exactly. They were ordinary goblins. But those who wanted more power turned into hobgoblins. and those who wanted to live deep in the forests turned into leaf goblins. And all thanks to this stone. The protagonist was surprised. So this is what evolution means. He asked Elvin, "Is he a hobgoblin?" Elvin's eyes bulged and he protested that it was not so. He had never used this stone. The shaman confirmed his words, that the general was born with such a body. Rihanna was perplexedly imagining the general in swaddling clothes. Varys continued, he thought that this stone only existed in legends, and therefore he was surprised that it actually existed. The protagonist replied that, according to his King of the Cave, it allows the monster to get a new body and also prolongs its life. The allies looked at him questioningly without saying a word. Heel asked, do they want to test it? Varys noted that he was very interested in this item, but he was too attached to his body. Elvin exclaimed that his body was too good to change it or anything. Rihanna said that she would like to help Mr. Heel in any way, such as magic. But she could not use something so valuable. Varys noted that this was not a bad idea. Goblins cannot use magic, but perhaps if she evolves, then she will succeed. The protagonist supported the shaman. If she can use magic, then she will be very helpful to him. But above all, he would like her to live as long as possible. Rihanna bowed her head, she thought for only a moment. Then she turned to him and said that she wanted to evolve. The protagonist, holding an unusual stone in his hands, replied that then everything was decided. The princess took the stone in her hands, closed her eyes, and thought that she wanted to be with her master for a very long time. At that moment, she was completely illuminated by such a bright light that the allies even had to close their eyes. And when they opened their eyes, they could not believe what they saw. In front of them stood a girl of extraordinary beauty. Heel was amazed. Was she Rihanna? The princess examined herself, touched herself, and no less surprised asked him, what happened to her? Suddenly, blood gushed out of Mappa. The protagonist anxiously shouted his name, and then he plunged into darkness. When he came to his senses, he realized that he was in his room. The protagonist began to remember when he fell asleep. What happened? Suddenly he remembered everything and exclaimed, Rihanna evolved. The princess, on whose lap he was lying, noticed that it was so, and she was right there. He looked at her in surprise. The girl was smiling. Heel jumped up, turning around, and still not believing his eyes, exclaimed, Rihanna? The princess worriedly told him that he needed to lie down. He collapsed for no reason. The protagonist was amazed. Collapsed? She answered that Mappa poured blood on him, and after that he collapsed. The protagonist objected. No, not because of that. He was just a little tired. It was true. He asked her how long he slept. How was Mappa feeling? Rihanna told him that it was still night, and Mappa was resting not far from him, in the corner. Heel saw that the old man was sleeping peacefully, and Shell was his pillow. Then the protagonist turned to her. He asked her if she was okay. Who knew that she would look like a human? The princess confessed to him that she really didn't like the way she looked in the past. She had been cursed as a child, becoming sick, and her growth had been stunted. Her beautiful sisters had laughed at her. Her parents had tried to help her at first, but had also started to reject her. So she had no doubt that when she used the evolution stone, she had wished to be beautiful. Rihanna bowed her head guiltily and asked for his forgiveness. She had used such a precious stone for her own selfish desire. The protagonist looked at her in amazement and addressed her by name. He didn't know how to say it, but he felt that he had changed since he came to this island. So if she felt like she had a new life, wouldn't that be wonderful? And wouldn't it be a waste if she evolved but didn't get the body she wanted? The princess placed her hand on his and thanked the protagonist. She added that her body, her life, and her name were all given to them. So she offers him everything she has. She brought his hand to her lips, intending to kiss it. At that moment, Mappa woke up, which made the protagonist very happy. Apparently, the Belden tribe was also shocked by Rihanna's evolution. She came out to her allies in a beautiful dress and said that it was made from the fabric of Terran and her spiders. Do they like her outfit? Elvin and Varys saw how the evolution took place. But many could not believe that it happened so suddenly. Whispers were heard among the goblins. Who is this? They say it's Princess Rihanna. But when they saw how hard she worked, they soon realized that it was, indeed, Rihanna. Not only that, she dedicated herself to studying martial arts and magic. It seemed that the princess's ambitions were limitless. At one point, the protagonist was looking at the girl as she worked with rapture and noticed some kind of drawing on her leg. Varys came up to him and asked if he had some kind of idea in mind. Heel was embarrassed by his sudden appearance and began to justify himself to him, saying that he had not looked at the princess's legs or something like that. The shaman laughed and said, well, as expected of him. He explained that the drawing on the girl's leg was her coat of arms farmer. The protagonist asked again in surprise, coat of arms? The shaman explained that farmer makes the harvest more abundant. Entrusting the plantation to the princess was a very good decision. The protagonist asked him if goblins had coats of arms. Varys replied that they did, and was that strange? Heel apologized to him for his ignorance. It was just that in his kingdom, they thought that only people had coats of arms. Varys admitted that, in fact, even he had his own coat of arms. He showed the protagonist his palm, and MC exclaimed in surprise, "Is this the crest of the King of Sorcery?" The shaman replied, "It looks like that." Heel asked him in amazement, "It looks like what?" "This is an incredible crest, isn't it? Only one of his brothers has it." Varys agreed with him, but he thought it was useless for a goblin like him who couldn't use magic. Well, it was thanks to this that he was able to continue his research without getting bogged down in the power of the crest. The protagonist wanted to say something to him, but the shaman said that this was a pointless conversation. Moreover, the plan he mentioned yesterday should have been talked about better. Varys' plan was to reclaim land from the sea to expand the island. With more territory comes more harvest. And they also had to create an expanded space for the children to play. The shaman turned to him and lamented, if only he had the raw materials. The protagonist told him that he wanted to try something, so let him leave it to him. He had thought of the procedure, so it was okay. The protagonist could use the workshop outside the cave. The voice informed him that the workshop had been activated, processing rock was possible, as well as combining rock and sand to make gravel. So first, Heel created stone blocks. Then they placed the material in the planned places. The protagonist used water magic to remove the seawater. Then they filled the space with rock and gravel and covered the surface with spider mud. The protagonist thought that they had done a great job. Would this be enough for now? When he ran out of soil, he used the rock to make a kind of public playground. His allies were amazed at his work. Everyone rushed to this pavement, but the protagonist warned them that it was still dangerous. He told one of the little ones that it would be okay if he just ran around. All the children thanked him with smiles and joy. He was embarrassed and said, "You're always welcome." The princess came up to him. She also expressed her gratitude to him and expressed her confidence that they would be able to grow a great harvest. The protagonist happily answered her that he was looking forward to it. Mappa was especially happy about the new pavement. He ran along it and jumped like a child. The protagonist and Rhianna watched him with smiles. They did not immediately notice that something was happening. And when they realized, it was too late. It is not clear from where, but killer birds began to fly at them. The protagonist shouted for everyone to return to the cave. All the inhabitants of the island ran for cover in panic. One child stumbled and fell. Full ran up to him, called him an idiot, and shouted at him to get up. She helped him get up. Meanwhile, the protagonist, using his magical ability, tried to hold back the birds. But one still broke through his defense and flew straight at the general's daughter, who was fiddling with the fallen boy. She covered his eyes with her hand so that he would not see this horror. At that moment, the head of the killer bird flew off like a ball. The protagonist was amazed. What happened? It was General Elvin who came to the rescue. The girl called out to her father. He called her by name and told her to get out of here. Elvin furiously entered the battle with the opponents, dealing with them like fluff. The protagonist was shocked by the terrible, enormous power of the general of the Belden tribe. He praised him, saying, "Good job," and joined him, repelling the attack of the enemies. At that moment, a magic shield appeared from somewhere which protected the protagonist from the attack of the main killer bird. It was Rhianna who came to their aid. Elvin and the protagonist called out to her with alarm. She turned to them and told MC that she can cover too. Let him do what he must do. He thanked her for her help. Then he gave everyone clear and short instructions. The main people, to the shelter. He told the rest of the allies to hurry up and come too. He turned to the princess and the general. He would take the rear and the two of them, let them protect the entrance. Although, he immediately changed his mind. Now he knew who would best protect the cave. After all, he had a stone heart, which could become the basis for an artificial organism. The protagonist activated the stone and directed it at the entrance to the cave. The golem took 300 stones. Several birds rushed to the cave, but at that moment a huge block appeared in front of them, which protected the shelter. A voice told the protagonist that a large-sized doll, golem, was constructed. The goblins that ran into the cave were in a panic from this block. The protagonist shouted to them that it was a golem. It will protect the cave. At that moment, Shell rushed to the bird that had grabbed Mappa, covered its mouth, covered the old man with his slime, and removed him to a safe distance, hiding him inside himself. The protagonist appreciated the slime's effect. Now they didn't have to worry about accidentally hitting Mappa. He turned to the general. Could he gather all the opponents together? Elvin told him to leave it to him. The general activated some threads and very cleverly entangled the opponents with them. The enemies began to break free. The goblin laughed ominously and said that he had ropes made of spider silk in his hands. They couldn't break them. The protagonist gave them the command to lie down on the ground, and at that time he activated the blizzard, skill. It was such a strong magic that the allies barely held on, even lying on the ground. The enemy began to retreat in the face of such a powerful attack. Heel noticed that they were leaving. Everyone began to rejoice at the victory. Elvin told the protagonist that he did a great job. Rihanna was already running to MC. She worriedly asked him if he was hurt. Suddenly, she tripped and fell. He called her name with concern. The girl was embarrassed. She felt very uncomfortable about the situation. She apologized to the protagonist and explained that she was really scared for him, but he was with her, so now she could not worry about him. He answered her that he saw it. Then, the protagonist made a scared face and admitted to her that this was the first time he really fought monsters. Both the girl, the shaman, and the protagonist burst out laughing after his words. Varys noted that he was glad that he was okay. Then Heel helped the princess get up. They were surrounded by all the inhabitants of the island. The protagonist, clutching the bottle hanging around his neck, thought that everyone, even someone like him, could become someone like a real ruler. Returning back to the cave, the protagonist asked the princess if she could eat a killer bird. She answered that she could. It was very good. He told her that they would eat roast meat today. A little later, during a delicious dinner, Elvin said that he would like to thank their boss. Heel was embarrassed and suggested that everyone start eating. They were having meat today. That night, when they fought off the killer birds, they had an unprecedented banquet. Rihanna, laughing, told the protagonist to pounce on the meat. The protagonist admitted to her that he had never eaten monster meat, but that color, that smell, made him incredibly hungry. He bit off a piece, tasted it, and then began to gobble it up with pleasure. He no longer had any doubts about it. Rihanna giggled. Apparently he liked the food. They still have soup. The protagonist did not refuse the soup either, praising her culinary skills. After finishing the soup, he saw meat at the bottom of the plate and asked her, "Is it the same?" The princess remarked ironically, "Did he notice?" She explained to him that this bird has different tastes depending on the part that is eaten. The wing and leg taste like chicken. The belly tastes like beef. The shoulder, like pork. The protagonist said in surprise, it can taste like 3 different animals. He thought that it would be dangerous if they attacked again, but they can also see them as a good source of food. He left the golem to stand guard. The shaman approved of his actions. Leaving a guard was a good idea. Killer birds do not attack those who are larger than them. Also, Varys shared his idea with him. He will gather a guard squad. Perhaps it would be a good idea to build walls and watchtowers. They would also serve to protect the fields from damage by salt. The protagonist remarked that he had a good idea. He could leave the processing of the stone to him and let him take care of the planning. Suddenly, they heard a slurping sound. Turning around, they saw a girl gnawing on a bone with meat. The protagonist remarked in surprise, saying that he was almost certain it was the general's daughter. The girl put her hands on her hips and told him that she was full. He had given her that name, hadn't he? The protagonist apologized to her and asked her if she needed something. She asked him why he was so strong. Heel was surprised by her question. Strong? Was she talking about magic? So it was for mining. He had been digging up stones that increased his magic power. That was how he had become stronger. Full asked in amazement, were there magic stones in this place? Could she start digging too? Rihanna told her that in order to use magic, goblins must first evolve and change their bodies with the help of an evolution stone. The girl told them that she was planning to evolve. The protagonist was puzzled. Is it that easy? Besides, they don't have an evolution stone. At that moment, Elvon appeared. He hit his daughter on the head and told her not to bother the boss, and let her stop talking like that. He apologized to MC for his daughter. She was always wondering how to become stronger. The protagonist laughed and said that with a strong father like him, nothing can be done. The goblin asked him in surprise, "Is that true?" Heel turned to the girl and told her that if she wanted to get an evolution stone, she should dig. And if she found it, she could use it. Full exclaimed with delight, not believing her ears, "Is this true? Is he sure?" And without waiting for his answer, she began to rejoice. She is good at mining ore. She promises to help Mr. Heel. The general asked the MC if he was sure. The protagonist answered him that having more people who could use magic would be for the better. He knew that. Suddenly, Rihanna felt something happening to her. A voice announced that 500 magic stones had been used. She asked the protagonist in surprise, "What was that?" He told her that he had tried some magic stones on her to increase her magic power. She was amazed. On her? And then exclaimed that she understood everything. She would do her best to become better. Elvin noted that this was right, and she needed to gain strength. She should start eating right. The princess did not dispute his words. So, today they finished land reclamation and got delicious meat. They had a feast in honor of Thanksgiving, and this day became the first memorable day on Sheol Reef. The protagonist led his allies to a large freezer chest and sneezed. The refrigerator for storing large quantities of food was Rihanna's idea. She noticed that such a device would be suitable and suggested that he leave here. Going outside, the protagonist said that now the meat would not spoil. The princess replied that it was so. There, on the continent, food would be stored for more than half a year if it was stored in frozen caves. Mappa needed a large steel door, but apparently, he also had complaints about the conveniences. He drew what he would like. Heel asked him if he wanted him to give the stone such a shape. He praised him for drawing well. The forge was also updated. The shaman noticed some kind of construction and asked Mappa what it was. It was wonderful. Rihanna said that she would periodically use freezing to make sure the ice did not melt. Lately, she had become more confident in herself. Thanks to Elvan and Varys, the outer defense was going well. Now the protagonist could again focus on mining. Bull approached him with a pickaxe on her shoulder and said that she was surprised that nothing bad had happened in all this time. The protagonist agreed with her. She continued that the Cave King was indeed amazing. She knew that the light optimized their production and allowed them to avoid cave-ins. But not knowing anything about the mines was simply too careless. The protagonist replied that this was true. Full noted that they needed ventilation. This dust was harmful to the lungs. He also mined coal, right? If the gas accumulated, he could be poisoned or, in the worst case, explode. Heel was amazed. Explode? She explained that there was a device for supplying air from the outside. He should ask Map to build it. The protagonist was amazed. That would be very useful. She certainly knew a lot about the mines. She told him that she had been working since she was a child. Showing him her shoulder, on which there was a drawing, the girl said that it was a miner's crest. It certainly doesn't hold a candle to his Cave King, but she can dig too. MC noted that this was encouraging. If she noticed anything else, she should not be afraid to tell him about it. The girl assured him that she would do so. He thought that the general's daughter was experienced. Although she was lagging behind in terms of speed, she worked very efficiently, and her intuition in mining ore was simply amazing. The protagonist felt that she was his greatest rival. Full noted that now that she thought about it, she wanted to ask him. Did he have a father or something? The protagonist, interrupted by her question, began digging again. He told her that he did. The girl expressed confidence that he was a great man. He thought about her words. To be honest, he was afraid of his father, and his brothers too. It was true that he had acquired incredible magical power, but his family was a family with unlimited power that eclipsed even what he had. He asked her, did she want to become stronger than her father? Full shrugged and said that she didn't care. The protagonist chuckled. She was so easy to read. At that moment, she asked in surprise, was this a karst cave? Heel turned around in surprise. She exclaimed that she did it. She thought there was something there. When they entered, the girl was amazed. The room was huge. There were stone statues in the niches of the walls. Full turned to the protagonist. She noticed the evolution stone was in a stone room like this, right? He told her that she was right. The general's daughter approached one of the statues, as if enchanted. She wanted to touch the statue she approached, but as soon as she extended her hand, the statue's eyes lit up. The protagonist saw this and shouted at the girl not to touch it. The statue came out of the niche. The protagonist instantly used his shield skill. Looking back at the girl, he asked her if she was okay. Full answered that she was. Heel explained to her that they were golems, but the one he made couldn't use magic, right? So there was something that affected the appearance of magic? At that moment, the general's daughter warned him that the golems had started moving. He strengthened the magic shield and noticed that these even had swords. The statues began to advance on them from all sides, and the protagonist had to use the storm skill. His attack was successful. His powerful blow scattered the golems into the stones. Full was almost hit by it. Having finished with the golems, he helped the girl up and asked her if she was hurt. Having answered that she was okay, she apologized to him. She rushed forward without thinking. He protested. It exceeded all his expectations at the moment when these golems appeared. The protagonist asked Shell to inform everyone that they need to stop mining. The girl showed the stone she found to the protagonist and asked him, "Is this golden stone an evolution stone?" This interested him. He asked her to let him look at it. The system immediately reported that it is a sorcerer's stone. It can store magic. It can also be used to create dolls. Heel answered her that this stone is completely different. Full was very upset by his words. Suddenly, Mappa appeared near them, which scared them very much. The old man began to run from one thing to another, jumping up and down. MC wondered, what does he want to do now? Full answered, who knows? At least he looks happy. The protagonist noticed that Mappa took the sword. The general's daughter said, "Anyway, how long is this old man going to stay half naked? Are all people like this?" Heel answered her that not many were, but he had never seen him so excited. He approached the sword the old man was taking and wondered if there was something in this sword. Taking hold of it, he was surprised to realize that the sword would not budge. The protagonist pulled it this way and that, but it still did not give in. Heel just wanted to take it. A voice told him that the king of the cave could currently collect nothing but minerals and mined items. Then the protagonist picked up an ice pick, noting that the processed items were quite good. He struck the sword with it, but the pick bounced off the weapon without even scratching it. The protagonist looked at the sword in confusion. The girl was amazed. It was useless? Even he could not break it? The protagonist answered her that he was not finished yet and continued hitting the sword. After a while, he finally managed to do what he had planned. But even Mappa's special ice pick couldn't handle it right away. What is this sword made of? The system informed him that it was orichalcum. It is lighter and stronger than metal. It can enchant magical effects. Heel knew that there were legends about this mineral. But if it is lighter than metal, then why couldn't he lift it? Meanwhile, the protagonist's allies entered the room. Elvin also tried to lift the sword, but even he, with his strength, couldn't do it. The protagonist was puzzled. What was going on? Rihanna asked him, what did it all mean? He explained to her that Mappa brought the sword, and everyone is trying to lift it, but it's all pointless. The system gave the information that this sword is made of 300 orichalcum. Heel was amazed. This sword was made of 300 orichalcum ingots. Full, meanwhile, began to stop her father, who still did not give up trying to cope with this weapon. She said that it was impossible. The goblin strained all his strength and with incredible effort raised the sword above his head. The goblins rejoiced. General, it was their great warrior Elvin. On his muscles was the coat of arms of a great warrior. Heel could not believe his eyes, so that was why Elvin was so strong. How could it be that he only now found out about it? At that moment, something went wrong. The sword pulled back with its weight, and the general fell backwards. The sword flew out of his hands. Everyone was worried about Elvin's condition because he was lying motionless. The protagonist examined him and noted that he was fine. It was not such a big wound from a blow. Elvin woke up while the protagonist was examining his head. He said with relief that he was a strong guy, but it was dangerous. The daughter rushed to the general, buried her face in him, and cried. He was confused and asked her what was she doing. She called him an idiot and added that she was really worried about him. The general hugged her, kissed her on the top of her head, and apologized to her. It was his mistake. He would be more careful in the future. Heel meanwhile saw Mappa lift the weapon with ease. His amazement knew no bounds. He had long ago realized that Mappa was a dwarf. The old man put the sword on the anvil and began to process it. The protagonist thought, the legendary race of dwarves likes to use rare minerals. Dwarves have incredible physical strength, mysterious techniques, and a noble spirit. Meanwhile, the old man approached him and handed him the weapon. Heel was surprised. Is it for him? But will he be able to hold it? He took the weapon in his hands and was amazed to realize that it was light. In his hands, an orichalcum ice pick shone with a bright shine. After that, Mappa made all kinds of orichalcum tools. He is a real genius. There was no doubt about it. Although, the protagonist did not think that the desire to be half-naked was part of the legend. The next day, they began to install the ventilation. Having gone outside, they began to break through the thickness of the stone. The inhabitants of the island fiddled with this for a very long time. The stones did not give in. But they came across something that even the general's axe did not work. But Elvin did not retreat from the intended goal. He continued to break through the solidity of the giant shell. Leaving it, they returned to the previous business. After some time, the matter finally moved from the dead point, and the stone crunched and then collapsed, and a gaping hole formed in the ground. The protagonist and Full breathed in the fresh air. The girls said that it was wonderful. The protagonist also noticed that the air in the mine became much cleaner, and all this thanks to the ventilation that Full advised. Mappa installed his created equipment, and thanks to the ventilation and the rotating blades of Mappa, fresh air began to constantly flow into the mine. Full said that it was all fine and dandy, but she wanted to get back to mining. The protagonist replied that he wanted to too, but they never knew where they might dig up something dangerous again, so she should wait a little longer. The girl agreed with him on that and decided that she would go to the forge for now. Meanwhile, the protagonist, twirling the rod in his hands, thought that in order for everyone to be able to mine safely, he decided to create new guard golems. He was going to use 14 stone heart ingots and 10 witchstone ingots for this. Mappa could make the equipment while he was doing this. The protagonist was going to make them a little more complex. When he finally tore himself away from drawing the design, he was amazed at himself, saying that he had gotten a little carried away. The defensive power of orichalcum equipment, a sword for close combat and a bow for ranged combat, using magic with a magic stone. Besides, artillery wouldn't hurt either. At that moment, Rihanna called out to him. He jumped in surprise. The girl apologized to him. She was very sorry. He seemed so focused that she was worried if everything was okay. She asked him if he had some time. He told her that he did. Did something happen to her? She smiled, exclaimed that it was great, and called him to follow her. The protagonist noticed that she was rarely so self-confident. She told him that it would be even more fun if he saw everything for himself. The girl intrigued him. Finally, she said that they had arrived. The protagonist's mouth fell open in surprise. For a moment, he thought he was in paradise. There were fruit trees, palm trees around him, and a light, fresh breeze was blowing. He exclaimed in surprise, like, apples, grapes, and now lemons and palm trees. He praised her. She had done a great job. It was a magnificent garden. The princess was embarrassed by his praise and muttered words of gratitude to him. She noticed that they still didn't have enough for everyone, so she had an idea. The princess took a fighting stance and used several techniques to strike the palm trees and lemon trees. She did it so deftly that Heel was dumbfounded with surprise. Having caught the fruits in her hands, she easily cut the coconuts and lemons, squeezed the juice out of them into one bowl, and said that you can mix the lemon and coconut juice with water. This way, they can all enjoy the taste in moderation. The protagonist, sipping the juice, thought in surprise. He knew that she was learning martial arts from Elvan. But where did she get such strength? Having tasted the juice, he exclaimed that it was very tasty. It is so refreshing, sweet, has the right sourness. It is even better than regular juice. At that moment, they heard the shaman call out to Elvan. They hurried to their allies. On the way, Elvan asked him if he thought he could restart the mining operation. He replied that he was considering it. His attention was drawn to what the goblin was holding. The protagonist asked in surprise, "Was that a shell?" Elvan replied that it was a satanic shell, which he had gotten earlier on the outskirts of the island. His find was snorting and wheezing with displeasure. The general warned the protagonist to be careful if he found one. The shell of this creature even repelled his axe. Keel was amazed. Even so, how could he open it then? The shaman replied that it would be easy if Elvan simply forced it to open. It only worked thanks to the general's incredible strength. He asked to leave it to the rest of the villagers who were trying to open it. When Elvan had completed the task, Varys climbed into the shell and pulled out the core. Having pierced the core, he poured the liquid from it into a bowl. The protagonist asked him what it was. At that moment, Mappa approached the bowl, dipped his finger in it, and licked it. The shaman explained that it was the liquid that the satanic shell used on its victim. Mappa fell backwards to the ground, folded his arms over his chest, and prepared to die. The protagonist rushed to Mappa and used the healing skill. Varys smiled and continued, "Depending on how it is processed, it can be a deadly poison." Then he added that he was just joking. They can collect Tyrian purple dye from it. The protagonist was surprised to note that even Varys sometimes jokes. Mappa immediately jumped off his makeshift deathbed. Heel thought, killer birds, satanic shells, ancient golems. In order to protect his domain both outside and underground, he created 14 new golems. They were trained by Elvan, learning how to build and count. Each of them was assigned a number in the order of their creation. Numbers 6 through 15 had magic stones. 2 of them were learning defensive magic, and the other 2 were learning one of the 4 attributes. At that moment, a bell rang. The lookout from above shouted that they were in trouble. More satanic shells. Elvan asked him where they were. The lookout replied that they were in a part of the wall that was not yet finished, and there were a lot of them, more than 50 of them. Heel asked the shaman what their weakness was. Varys answered that they could withstand both heat and cold, but they could not withstand lightning. The protagonist asked the general if he could leave it to him. He wanted to test the new golems. Elvan agreed to this, but asked the protagonist to call him immediately if problems began. Hyle assured him that he would do so. Rhianna anxiously called out his name. He asked her, "She knows lightning magic, right?" The princess replied that she does. Let him leave it to her. The protagonist called the 1st, 6th, 7th, 14th, 15th, and ordered them to step forward. He and Rhianna were on the first golem. Approaching the wall that the shells were attacking, the protagonist ordered the 7th and 6th golems to stand in defense. The golems stepped forward and began to hold back the enemy's onslaught, dealing blows left and right. Rhianna, meanwhile, used the magic ability Spark and aimed a blow at the cluster of shells. Elvan exclaimed with admiration, like, "Wow, the princess is hitting." The shaman noted that the large golems looked like mobile fortifications. The protagonist praised the princess for her excellent work and ordered the 14th and 15th golems to open fire on the enemy. The shells, realizing that they could not defeat their allies, began to spit their liquid at the protagonist. But the golems standing on defense deftly repelled all the spits. Meanwhile, Rhianna continued to attack with her magic. Elvan proudly said that the golems would not let the satanic shells reach their boss with their paralyzing liquid. Everything would be decided faster than he thought. Rhianna did not weaken her ability for a second, attacking the enemy again and again. When the shells were finally finished, the protagonist praised everyone for their excellent work. He thought that golems that can use magic are really strong. Rihanna did more than he expected. The princess suggested that he take the shell meat to the freezer before it spoiled. The protagonist agreed with her and asked the first golem they were standing on to lower them down and help take the meat. Rihanna heard a familiar sound. Turning around, she saw that several shells had become active and were about to attack the protagonist. She shouted at him to be careful and jumped on his back, covering him with her body. Elvin ran up to the enemy and dealt with the enemy with a few blows. He asked the protagonist if he was okay. The protagonist answered that he was fine and thanked him. Then he asked the princess if she was okay. The girl, still covering him with her body, apologized to him for not being able to move. Her body was numb. Heal said in fear that he would heal her right away. He used his healing skill. When the princess was able to stand up, she thanked him for his help. He protested he should be the one thanking her. The princess touched herself and noticed that she was all sticky. MC shrugged and noted that it must be very disgusting. He added that he would run for water now, and she would be able to wash off the nasty slime. The princess objected she could do it herself. Suddenly, MC noticed some glitter in one of the shells. Together with the princess, they dived inside the shell and saw a small ball that shimmered in all colors. Heal was surprised. What was it? Rihanna answered him that it was a pearl. What a find! It is especially rare among satanic shells. The protagonist took it in his hand and noted that it was really beautiful. He turned to the girl and told her that she could take it. Rihanna did not expect this. She was very surprised. The protagonist smiled and said that he did not really understand the value of jewelry. In his mind, he thought that the pearl suited her very well. The girl took it in her hands and simply blushed with embarrassment. Then she returned the jewelry to him and said that she could not accept it yet. MC was surprised. It seemed he couldn't just give it to her. The next day, they started digging again. Heal stopped and said it was time to take a break. Full, without stopping working, replied that she wanted to work some more. The protagonist allowed her to do so. He added that she shouldn't forget to eat. The girl replied that she wouldn't forget, especially since the princess's food was simply excellent. The protagonist asked Golem number 15 to call him if something happened. And so, under the protection of the golems, they resumed mining. The golem guarding the mine was wearing a crown from Map. Full turned out to have much more energy than the others. At that moment, Rihanna came into the mine and thanked everyone for waiting. Carrying plates of food in her arms, she said that today their entire menu was made from satanic shells. There was a lot of food, so they could not hold back. Everyone present began to devour the delicacies from the princess with appetite. It seemed that these shells were nesting somewhere nearby. They kept coming closer. Thanks to this, the allies got good food, dyes, and durable shells. The currents around their island brought them more than just a blessing. One day, in the weaving workshop, the protagonist admired the Tyrian purple they had created with their own hands. Heal exclaimed that it looked better than the one used by the nobles. The shaman said that it was an honor for them to hear such praise. They would use this fabric to make things like clothes. At that moment, a dejected Elvon entered their workshop. Heal told him to appreciate the fabric they had created. It turned out very beautiful. But, noticing the general's dejected state, they stared at him in amazement. The goblin asked the protagonist if he could go with him to the conquered land. When they arrived, they saw an armored creature lying on the wall, half of its arm missing. One of the goblins said in amazement that it was an orc. The protagonist was surprised. An orc? The general said that he was caught on the embankment. They dragged him here. He continued angrily that this seal on his armor said that this was undoubtedly the tribe that destroyed their home. Elvin turned to the goblins frozen in horror. He called them idiots and was indignant. What are they afraid of this body? The goblins seemed to wake up. They ran up to the orc and began to kick him, because their families and their comrades died because of people like him. The protagonist tried to stop them in horror. Of course, he understood that this orc was an enemy of the Belden tribe, and he had no right to stop them. But at that moment, the princess shouted at them to stop. All the goblins stared at her in amazement. The princess was indignant. Kicking an inanimate body is a disgrace. Will the Belden tribe even lose its pride? The goblins began to justify themselves to her, saying that she herself knows what they did to their tribe. They even used the undead body of their king as an example, nailing it to the wall for all to see. The princess wiped away a tear from the memory and said, "Still, it does not mean that they should act like that. Not they, but their mister. Heal should decide what to do with those who end up on this island." She bowed to the protagonist and offered him her apologies. The protagonist thanked her with his eyes. He thought, yes, that is true. Right now, he is the leader of this island and these people. Therefore, he must take responsibility. He told them that he understands them. They are tormented by sadness and they are eager to vent their anger. But he will not allow anyone to mock someone who is no longer breathing. He asked for their forgiveness, bowed to them, and turned to them to listen to his request and restrain their anger. Elvan was indignant. What is he doing? He's asking his boss to raise his head. The shaman remarked, yes, he puts them in a hopeless situation. The protagonist turned to him. Can he take care of his burial? If he, of course, does not mind. Varys answered him that this orc is not the only one. They pulled out 24 undead bodies, and not only orcs. Now there were also kobolds. They are their worst enemies, and they also fought with the orcs. The protagonist was surprised. Did orcs and kobolds really fight? Varys wondered why they were in this remote area. At this moment, Elvan turned to the protagonist. He said that all this is very strange. They all have battle wounds, but some of them have really terrible wounds. The protagonist was surprised by his words. The goblin continued that the wounds that could not be inflicted by an axe or a sword, they are probably inflicted by fangs, but he has never seen such large ones. There was a body there that looked like half of it had been blown away by intense heat. He, the protagonist, couldn't do something like that, even with magic, right? Heel asked him tensely. Did he mean that someone else had attacked them? The general admitted that he didn't know. But for now, they should be more vigilant and watch out for armed ships. Heel said that it was all very confusing, but he didn't want to worry everyone. He assigned Varys to take care of the funeral and Elvan to take care of the defense. The protagonist himself, together with Rhianna, started looking for things that might be useful to them. He really felt bad. They had to survive on this island, where they could only mine ore. Rhianna, sorting through things, noted that everything was in terrible condition. The protagonist agreed with her. It would be difficult to fix. At that moment, a sound was heard. Heel asked the princess, did she say something? She answered in surprise that it was not so. They looked around and realized that the sound came from a chest that was standing nearby. The protagonist tried to open it, but he did not succeed. He noticed that this chest had a lock. The protagonist used the opening skill, and the lock opened. The protagonist threw back the lid. Something jumped out of the chest and rushed into his arms. He stared at it in amazement. A puppy? It was like fluff, white and with soft fur. Lilu was so happy about her release that she began to jump on the protagonist. Heel felt that she was shaking violently. He asked the princess, what should he do with it? Taking off his outerwear, he showed her the wet spot and said in surprise, Lilu left this stain on the inside? The girl laughed, asked him for forgiveness, and replied that she would wash it later. He noticed, but this Lilu, who is she? The princess expressed her opinion that it was a kobold. She took it in her arms and said that the child was not guilty of anything. She was sure that her tribesmen would understand everything. Heel thought that this little kobold was their enemy. He was not so sure, but he thought that they should take care of her. The next day, MC began to mine ore. Seeing the power of the new pickaxe, he was surprised to notice that the special orichalcum ice pick from Mappa was really great. He thought about the battle on the coastal waters. He did not have an answer to what Elvan suggested, but at a time like this, the best he could do was to mine. They needed to mine raw materials to protect the island. Now he needed to check the inventory again. The protagonist, looking at the mined materials in the inventory, said that he was getting less and less magic stones. There are enough of them, but he wants to increase Rhiann's magical energy and make it so that one day Full and Varys can use magic too. Well, nothing can be done about it. They don't appear. Suddenly, he noticed an unknown item in his inventory, took it out, and after examining it, noticed that it was not a stone, but a seed. Did it end up in his inventory with the rest because he dug it up? Suddenly, Full called out to him and ran towards him. MC asked if she was digging here too. She replied that something was going on up there. After a while, they went upstairs and noticed Elvan scaring Lilu. After that, he asked why the puppy wouldn't stop crying. Suddenly, Full flew into his back and screamed furiously. What kind of nonsense did he do here? Elvan replied that he was also calming her down. MC explained that he was just scaring the puppy. Seeing him, the puppy immediately ran to him. The main character took her in his arms and Lilu began to lick him. Full chuckled and noted that she had indeed been waiting for him. Rhianna said with a smile that Lilu had cried after she woke up, and the general was doing it. The puppy probably thinks he's her dad. Full asked with a smile, didn't she pee on him? Maybe she had marked him. Varys explained that it was possible, since it was their nature to mark others. The MC saw a chest next to him and wondered if there was anything in there. The goblin agreed, but added that the chest seemed smaller than he thought. Looking at the outside, he thought that maybe there was a false bottom. Even an orichalcum knife couldn't pierce it, although it seemed like the chest was made of wood. The protagonist gave the puppy to Rhianna and, using the gathering skill, opened the secret bottom of the chest. He took out 3 books and some kind of rhombus from there. The protagonist thought that this was the history of the Tiberius tribe, the Tiberian Book of Techniques, writing. Is that what their tribe is called? And what is this white stone? A system window appeared, notifying that it was a thought stone capable of storing thoughts. Elvin asked with interest what was written there. Rihanna added that she also could not read difficult letters. MC looked at Varys and seeing his serious face called out to him. Suddenly the thought stone glowed brightly and a hologram of the queen of the Tiberius tribe, Alcmena, appeared next to them. She said that if they were listening to this, they must have removed the seal from the chest. The one they found in the chest was her newborn. She did not have much time left. It may be hard to believe, but their ship was pursued by the legendary beast Leviathan. Their battle with the orcs left them exhausted. Their weapons and magic did not work against it. They had no way to escape from this beast. She knows it may be an unreasonable request, but she asks him to become her child's adoptive parent. All they offer him as a reward is 2 of their strongest warriors, who are tasked with protecting the chest, and 3 of their books forbidden to outsiders. It seems she should go now. Let him please take care of the child, and maybe someday her child will hear her last words. Her mother Alcmena loves her. After this message, Elvin discontentedly noted that it was so like these damn Tiberians to leave their child to someone else. By the way, where is this escort? Rihanna exclaimed that he should not say such things. He warned the protagonist, saying that he will go tell the guards about this. MC said that he thinks they know everything about the Tiberius tribe. Full with a sad face said that the Tiberius and Belden tribes have been fighting for territory for a long time. Her older brother died in that war. The protagonist replied that he could see it, but even after hearing that, Elvin did not look at the child. Full exclaimed that her father would never hate a child. Varys explained that the general blamed himself for not being able to protect his son. He also lost his younger brother in that war, but he did not hold a grudge against that child. MC remarked that he thought he would take care of that puppy. By the way, did she say his name? Varys replied, she only said that she was her child. Rihanna asked, was she doing this on purpose? So that the people who cared for her would treat her as their own. The protagonist asked if she had any ideas then. The girl, after a bit of hesitation, asked how about a name like Riel? MC agreed, raised the dog up and exclaimed that from now on, she was Riel. A system window appeared, saying that the name selection was complete. The protagonist thought that this is not what he was aiming for. But he thinks that it will be good if the puppy lives in the cave from this day on. Full smiled and noted that she understood that they took parts from their names. Rihanna immediately became embarrassed and began to justify herself. Varys said that now that everything was settled, there was a problem that needed to be solved. MC agreed, and with a serious face clarified that it was Leviathan. The protagonist asked if Mappa was sure about that. He used fire magic towards the golem, but it absorbed everything with its shield. The protagonist was surprised to note that the Orichalcum shield was even more effective with defensive magic. It seemed very durable. How are the others progressing? Varys said that Mappa's project was simply magnificent. With this, they would be able to protect the island even from giant monsters. MC said, is Leviathan really that mythical monster? Elvin with a serious face added that, frankly speaking, he didn't believe it either, but a group of soldiers led by the royal Alcmena, whom everyone feared and called the sorceress, as they knew, was destroyed by a monster lurking nearby. Suddenly, Riel climbed onto a large beam and started barking. Elvin excitedly climbed after her and shouted, how did she get there? It was very dangerous. While he was climbing, the dog relieved itself on his bald head and he screamed. Suddenly, Rihanna came running and told the puppy not to distract the boys from their work. She apologized for the dog. Was he okay? Elvin replied that everything was fine. He thought that Riel was in the field with her. The girl explained that she was, indeed, energetic. Varys explained that kobold children grow up quickly. Very soon, Riel would walk on 2 legs. MC showed him the seed and asked if he knew what it was. Varys replied that he was very sorry, but he had never seen it anywhere before. Suddenly, Rihanna said Yggdrasil. Wait, why did she say that? It just slipped out of her mouth. The protagonist asked, was that her coat of arms? Varys noted that he had heard that the farmer's crest bestowed knowledge of plants. And yet, he knew about Yggdrasil. It was a giant tree that blessed all living things. However, it was just an old tale. Elvin wondered if it was just an old story. He replied that it was, but so was the evolution stone found on the island. After a while, MC came out of the mine and shouted that he had broken through. This was a great chance, because the cultivated lands had become a kind of defensive base. However, there was supposed to be a field here. He had enough materials. He was counting on spiders. The protagonist thought that his search function only worked in the cave, so he needed helpers to bring soil outside. He had done this once, so he was already used to it. That same evening, they finished cultivating the new land. After a while, they created an area for the tree. The protagonist shouted that they did a good job. We need to go quickly and plant the Yggdrasil seed. While planting, he noticed Rihanna throwing out unknown seeds. MC asked what they were. The girl explained that they were flower seeds from her hometown. She thought that it would look beautiful here. The protagonist replied with a smile that it was beautiful. What about Mappa? He thought that he should at least say something since he was there. Suddenly, Rihanna called out to him and noted that it was growing. Should she use the sunstone? MC replied that she didn't need to yet. Mappa immediately started turning his head, and the protagonist said that she should try using the sunstone then. The girl took it, brought it to the sprout, and in an instant, it began to grow at an incredible speed. The protagonist was surprised to notice that the sunstone was really an incredible thing. Suddenly, the tree began to grow even more. MC asked if she was sure that she only used one stone. Rihanna agreed with the same surprise and added that it didn't look very good. The protagonist grabbed her hand and shouted that they had to run. Suddenly, Mappa tripped and was trapped by the tree roots. After a while, it became so big that it dwarfed their home. The protagonist shouted in surprise that this was Yggdrasil. After a while, MC looked at the bushes and called out to Mappa. Rihanna pointed to the side and shouted that he was there. He was swallowed by the branches. The protagonist said that they needed to go and help him. Let Shell call Varus. The slime ran away and they continued on their way. Rihanna was surprised by how big it was. The protagonist agreed and added that it looked more like a mountain. Is Mappa okay? They'll get him out now. The old man, trapped by the branches, completely relaxed. MC noted that he didn't seem to even be worried. Okay, we need to think of a way to help him. Rihanna said that while he was lying there, let him listen to the wonderful smell. The protagonist agreed and added that he hadn't smelled the forest for a long time. She asked if he also felt a huge magical power inside the tree. The protagonist was surprised to note that she was now also studying magic and could feel its flows. The flow of magic, but this magic was similar to the magic of the holy type. The girl replied that it was a strange tree. Suddenly, MC noticed that help had arrived and said that they should ask Varus to explore the tree. Riel ran up behind them and began to bark cheerfully. The protagonist excitedly shouted that it was not safe to walk around here alone. Rihanna called out to him with a smile and asked how she had come so far alone. The forest was like home to her. It seemed that she was just homesick. The protagonist replied with a smile that she was probably right. Well, let Riel explore Yggdrasil with them. The three of them set off, and having climbed higher, came across a cliff with a beautiful view. MC said that, what a beautiful view stretches out from here. Rihanna noted with a smile that this was the first time she had looked at the island from such a height. The protagonist pointed out with a serious face that there was not a single ship in sight. The kingdom had simply forgotten about him. The girl wondered how he ended up alone on this island. It was just that he never spoke, and she was always afraid to ask. The protagonist sat down on a tree root and replied that he did not speak, but since she asked, he would answer. He was banished from the kingdom because he was useless. Rihanna exclaimed in displeasure that this could not be. He was not useless at all. MC continued that he simply never cared about ruling the capital. Using the old servant buildings, he escaped from the castle, wasting his time on books. Compared to how he was treated in the castle, this island is not the worst solution. The protagonist remembered how he came across a demon and screamed in fear. What did he forget in the capital? What's going on here? Why is the demon chained? And if you look closely, he was mocked enough. Maybe try recovery magic? For some time, the protagonist began to look after the demon. He named the demon Lopez. Giving the demon food and a name, others would think that he was crazy, but for him, the time spent with him was the best. He felt more comfortable with him than with people. In another memory, MC, holding Lopez in his arms, said with a smile that even if he could not hide him, he would simply hire someone who could. And then, he would be able to fly away from the capital. He promises this. Suddenly, he heard someone's footsteps and fearfully wondered who would go to such a place. The protagonist continued to tell the girl that it was a man with shining golden hair, snow-white skin. It was a guy who was beautiful like a girl. The 18th prince of the Sinfaris kingdom, Orin, his younger brother. He looked at the demon with a sly smile and noticed that he was more energetic than usual. And he looked more lively. The guy used a magic skill and, having injured the demon, noted that precision is very important even in magic. Since he does not resist, they can have fun to their heart's content. Behind him was a crowd of students from the academy who wanted to practice on the demon. After some time, everyone began to attack Lopez. The protagonist continued, saying that he believes that there were not only his brother, but also some other students of the elite magic academy, and they did not want to kill the demon, but only cripple him. At the moment when Lopez was attacked, the protagonist was standing behind the wall and was hysterical. When they left, he ran to the demon with tears in his eyes and began to apologize. After that, he looked after him every day. No matter how hard he tried, his healing spell didn't work on him. But they kept coming. He still couldn't open the lock on his collar. And if he didn't do anything, they would just kill him. One day, when Oren came with his friends to mock the demon, they met the protagonist. The younger brother was confused and asked what he was doing there. MC asked excitedly, saying that he should stop doing this. Maybe they should just let him go? Oren put on his gloves and, hitting him in the face, asked he, a member of the royal family, was spying on him? And he also wanted to protect the demon? Let him get out of the way. Or did he want to burn to ashes along with the monster? The younger brother began to threaten him with magic, but MC did not back down, knelt down and said that since that was what he wanted. Oren spread his hands to the side and said that after all, they were relatives. Okay, he can do whatever he wants. He's tired of training on this demon. Now it belongs to him. Come on, let him take off the collar and go away. But he will notice that he will not allow demons to exist on the capital's lands, and he will not be able to turn a blind eye to him for long. He gives him only 10 seconds. The guy with a sly smile began the countdown. MC shouted furiously that he cannot take off the collar from him. He tried to use the skill of opening locks, but nothing happened. A moment later, Oren burned Lopez to ashes and noted that he was pathetic. Poor demon, no one could help him, and just left him to die. The protagonist furiously tried to stab him in the back, but the younger brother's shield activated. He asked what he was trying to do. The protagonist, with tears in his eyes, asked how he could do this to Lopez. Oren replied that he seemed to have explained everything clearly to him. He was just useless. And he really thinks that he can at least touch him? MC continued his story. Then he woke up in a hospital bed. And then, as he said before, he was banished to these lands. He kept Lopez's ashes. He couldn't give it up. He wasn't worthy of such an honor. He couldn't keep his promise and just watched him die. That's just his personality. Rihanna cried out with tears in her eyes that it wasn't so. He wasn't useless or worthless at all. They, the group of goblins, Riel Lopez, he always helps them with all his might. Let him forgive her for crying. He's just been through so much. MC worriedly wondered why he told such a story now. Did he really want to hear pity? No, he wanted her to hear it. After a while, they walked a little further and came across a meadow with flowers. The protagonist was surprised to notice that these were the same flowers that grow in his homeland. The protagonist looked at Riel and noticed that the dog was having a lot of fun. The girl called out to him and said that she wanted to tell him something about Lopez. Most likely, her answer will not relieve him of regrets, but she wants him to remember that now, when he finds himself in trouble, all of them will help. So, he is no longer alone. Thank him for everything he did. MC was touched by her words. After a while, he thought that he asked Varys to examine the tree, and he learned that good ointment and tea are made from the leaves. They also make good juice. But depending on the amount, a headache may occur. And the branches of the tree are not only very light, but also very strong, which can even be compared to orichalcum. They tried to make pick handles from it, and it seems the branches of this tree have a fatigue-reducing effect. The protagonist noted that it was already time for dinner. Full replied that she was not tired. He said that she would continue tomorrow. The protagonist thought that the huge tree bestows its blessing on all living beings. Looking at its blossoms, he waits for a new harvest. Their life on the island is getting better and better. What will he get tomorrow? After some time, MC went to bed, when suddenly, in the middle of the night, Riel became nervous and pressed herself against him. He asked in confusion what was wrong with her. Suddenly, everyone came to him and excitedly asked what happened. Did they hear Riel crying? The protagonist answered that he thought she was just having a nightmare. Rihanna picked up the dog and asked if he could have nightmares too. Suddenly, she noticed a strange mark on the dog's left eye. Suddenly, they were all struck by an unknown force, and they all began to watch the event in which Alcmena fought with the Leviathan on the destroyed ship. After that, MC fell to the floor and excitedly asked, did they see it too? It was a Leviathan. The mark in Riel's eye gives clairvoyance. Varys said that he is not familiar with such a power, but he knows that everyone calls it the Eye of God. The protagonist said, then, what they saw. Varys interrupted him and added, the power of clairvoyance, Riel showed what happened to her mother. That vision was seen by absolutely all the inhabitants of the island, and everyone began to fear the Leviathan. One of the inhabitants of the island turned to the protagonist and asked, will he come to this island? Everyone began to ask, if he comes, what should they do? MC thought, can't compare him to ordinary monsters. If the Leviathan comes, will he be able to protect them all? Elvan shouted, hey, all of them. Then he folded his hands in front of his chest and asked, why do they all have such sad faces? They need to remember everything they've been through. If they all just bother their leader, then he won't be able to do anything. Then he looked at the protagonist and asked, is he wrong? The protagonist told them to calm down and listen to him. They don't know for sure if the Leviathan will attack the island, but they should prepare for battle. Even if it is a legendary beast, they will survive if they unite. They should all lend him their strength. After some time, MC and his team were sitting in the room. The protagonist leaned on his hand and said, he said something, but after that fight, he knew that his magic won't work on him. Then he turned to Mappa and asked if he thought an orichalcum weapon would be able to hurt him. He didn't answer him and fell asleep. Then MC added that they could only hide. He personally couldn't imagine his huge body heading deeper into the cave. That big hall, where they found the golems, could be a great shelter. They could also build a refrigerator there. Elvin stood with his arms folded and asked, but if he attacks the island, could it go to the bottom? Wouldn't it be better to leave it then? Then the protagonist said that he had a plan. After some time, they went down into the cave. MC held a pick in his hand and said, the moment of truth has come. Not long before he was asked, did he want to get new materials? He answered, all this time there were a lot of different materials here, and the deeper they go, the more new they find. Sheol is full of secrets and mysteries. Maybe there is something below that can kill the Leviathan. Then he scratched his head and added that at least he thinks so. Rihanna answered that he is right. Varys answered, okay. Then what about Riel? The protagonist turned and looked at her. Varys added that it seems that she cannot control her powers properly, but her clairvoyance, maybe, is useful for them. Full asked the protagonist, maybe they should use Riel? He turned his head back and looked at Riel, who had already fallen asleep in his backpack. Then he added that he will wake her up now. Full put her hand on his head and suggested to dig further. He agreed with him. So the island united, began to build a defense against the Leviathan. They have a lot of wood thanks to Yggdrasil. Therefore, the construction of the defense is progressing very quickly. Suddenly, Riel woke up and began to jump out of the backpack. MC looked at her and asked, did she find something? He followed her and noticed that Riel went to the toilet. Lately, she is quite gloomy, but her ability helps them see what is behind the stones. Sometimes she herself finds something for them. But even if they do not find anything, her skill is still very useful. A few weeks have passed like this. MC sat and stroked Riel's head, and she suddenly ran. Full asked what kind of reaction? Riel began to dig. She asked him again, does she want them to start digging in this place? The protagonist looked and thought that he didn't see anything there. Was everything okay? Then he said that Riel had found something there. If you dig carefully, before he could finish speaking, he fell underground. Full asked him if he was okay. MC held his head and replied that he was okay. There was a passage further. Then he saw a huge golem. There was a huge sword next to it. Full went down to it and said in surprise, a golem? The protagonist replied that it was, but it didn't have a core, and it itself seemed to be made of orichalcum, but that silver sword? It was beautiful, but it also scared him. He needed to get closer. MC hit the sword with his pickaxe, and the ringing of metals spread throughout the island. Mappa heard it and ran towards them. The protagonist stood and looked at the sword, asked what it was. It didn't look like he could break it. What was it made of? Mappa was already standing behind him, and MC turned back and was scared, and then asked him how he got here. Mappa fell to the ground. He began to pray to the sword. Bull asked what was wrong with him. He answered that he was more active now than when he found the orichalcum. Then he took this sword and left. The protagonist looked at him in surprise and asked, does he want to recycle this? After some time, they came to the smelter. Hill looked at everything in surprise, and then he asked what was wrong with Mappa. He was told that they do not know, but now they are raising the temperature because it is not enough. Rihanna came and asked what kind of big sword is this? MC looked at her and then told her to give him her hand. They stood opposite each other on both sides, near the furnace from above. The protagonist asked her, is she ready? She answered, yes. If you fill the furnace with their magic. They used flames at the same time, but everyone started shouting for a sword and asking them to keep the fire going. After melting that sword, they would get mithril. The material lost by the gods, the hardest material, capable of killing gods, can be imbued with magic. MC thought, capable of killing gods. Then he picked up Riel and shouted that they did it. He had no doubt that Mappa would make a great weapon out of it. In the meantime, they finished building a defensive wall. The protagonist looked at it and shouted, hooray! Then he added that the wall was more like a fortress. Varys told him that he remembered who it was built against. Their opponent is a legendary beast. They should prepare many options for the fight. Thus begins the first battle of Sheol. MC walked down the hallway and suddenly he saw Elvan and Riel in the room. He stood and looked at it. Then Rihanna touched his shoulder and whispered that he should be quiet. Elvan apologized for insulting Riel's mother. He added that as a general of his tribe, he knew that her mother was a great warrior. He then sat down and started petting Riel, telling her to just watch them avenge her mother. Riel put her paws on his face. It was his personal business. Now they can only rely on themselves when the Leviathan appears. Suddenly, the bells rang. MC was confused. Then he ran to Elvin and asked, "Is this a Leviathan?" He answered that it is not. When they all ran to the edge of the fortress, they saw ships. Varys was holding a telescope in his hand, and he asked the protagonist to take it in his hands. He asked, "A telescope?" Varys answered that Mappa had made it. Then he took it in his hands and began to look. He saw an emblem on the ship. Elvin said that it belonged to the orcs who attacked their tribe. MC gritted his teeth and asked, "What did these mean, survivors?" Elvin asked, "Do they want to attack the island?" He won't let them. Then they saw that they started shooting at the water. Everyone was confused. Elvin folded his hands in front of his chest, asked who they were attacking. Riel started barking. The protagonist looked at her eye and was shocked. An incredible amount of magical power comes from the water. Everyone was shocked by what they heard. And suddenly a monster emerged from the water, breaking one of the two ships. A huge black shadow appeared from under the water and rushed into the sky with a terrifying cry, revealing the wrath of the seas. They started shooting at him from the ship. To no avail, they did not cause any damage to him. The inhabitants of the island shouted that he was attacking someone's ship. Elvin rang the bell and shouted for them not to stand still and get ready for battle. He ordered them to take positions as they trained. MC wanted to address him, but he interrupted him and said that he was not going to save a single orc, he just wanted to kill the Leviathan while he was busy with them. Then the protagonist turned back and asked Full to give the order for everyone to evacuate to the cave. She said okay, and then she asked them not to die. They looked at her. Varys shouted for them to prepare the ballista. One of the goblins ran to give the order to prepare the ballista. Another one started to turn the mechanism, and a weapon started to rise from under the floor. Elvin looked at it and shouted that the mithril tip made by Mappa should pierce it. All mithril pierces everything. They started to aim. One goblin said 6 to the left and 3 above. The Leviathan wanted to attack the ship while Elvin shouted fire, and they fired their weapons. A huge arrow flew at the Leviathan, but he was able to dodge it calmly. Everyone was confused. MC asked how he was able to dodge it. How can his huge body be so agile? Elvin shouted that they will try again. The cannonballs did not damage him, but he dodged the arrow, so he understands that he can die from this. Meanwhile, the Leviathan dived into the water and swam towards them. They shouted that it is approaching, and they need to quickly load another shell. The protagonist looked at Rian and said that he and the golems will hold it back. She must prepare that magic. She agreed with him. Then he shouted, number 10 and number 11, ice. Number 12 and number 13, wind. They used Mega Blizzard, but they shouted that it is still approaching. The magic does not work. MC saw that the water next to him began to freeze. Then he shouted, great, if they freeze the water next to him, he will not be able to dodge. Then the Leviathan emerged from the water. The protagonist shouted, number 6 and number 7, more shields at an angle. They must not let it hit. They must reflect the beam. Meanwhile, the Leviathan began to attack them. It attacked them with its beam, but thanks to the golems, it did not work. Then it dove into the water again. Rihanna shouted that the Leviathan was approaching again. Then she asked the general if the ballista was ready. He answered her, almost. MC thought that it was swimming towards them without hesitation. I wonder if it can dodge from such a distance? Then they shot at it, and this time they were able to hit the arrow stuck in its body. The protagonist asked Rihanna to cast an invisibility spell, so they got an invisible arrow. Everyone started to shout happily. A direct hit. The general shouted for everyone to calm down and charge again. Then they started to shoot ropes at it to tie it up. The general said that it was a special rope made of spider thread and steel cable. They must not let him escape. Then MC shouted, 1 through 5, fire. The golems released their hands on the chains and tied up the Leviathan. The Leviathan was struggling to get away. The general shouted that the gears were breaking. The protagonist answered him that they would not last long. He answered him that the charge was ready. He ordered to aim straight at the head and kill him. The next second, the golem began to attack. The protagonist, perplexed, shouted, what? Small creatures appeared on the golem trying to gnaw through it. Rihanna shouted, it was that. Varys shouted, sea pursuers. They parasitize on large sea creatures, and now they were hiding on him. The next second, the monsters gnawed through the golem, and the protagonist shouted, number 1. After that, he turned to the archers and ordered to shoot them down. Arrows flew at the monsters, and then he saw that the sea pursuers began to disassemble the wall, and he shouted that they can crawl on walls too. They must shoot and not let them get here. At that moment, the Leviathan grabbed one of the chains with its jaw and, pulling it to the side, hit the golem against the stone wall. MC, seeing this, shouted, damn. The chain in the Leviathan's teeth broke, and then huge horns grew on its back. Rihanna paid attention to this and shouted that this did not look like the ones from which he shot a beam. The next second, bright flashes of energy flew from the Leviathan's horns right at them. The protagonist put his hands forward, creating a shield, and shouted, "Everyone hide behind this." Several blows rushed straight at the shield. Rihanna, trying to cover herself with her hands, called for Hill. He shouted that she should hold on. After a few moments, clouds of smoke appeared around, and he asked, "Is it all over?" But the next second, a huge tail of the Leviathan appeared from the smoke, which he struck forward, destroying the stone wall. Those behind the wall screamed in fear. "What is that noise up there?" The children, gathered together, cried loudly. The mother held them by the shoulders and said that everything will end soon. The girl, looking at her mother, took her hand and asked, "Will they lose their home again?" She answered that she should not worry. Mr. Hill and the others will defeat that monster. Meanwhile, MC flew far to the side, falling on Shell. Getting up, he thanked him and then saw the part of the golem that flew off. Taking it in his hands, he shouted, 6 and 7, protect everything. Then he saw a pile of stones and shouted, "Elvin, Varys, Mappa, Tirana, Rihanna." The sea pursuers were approaching him, opening their mouths with huge teeth. He looked at this and, breathing heavily, thought, "This is bad. The sea pursuers are breaking through." After that, he put his hand forward, creating a magic symbol, from which he released a powerful lightning bolt, knocking some of the monsters off their feet. His body was covered in sweat, and he thought that he was losing strength. The next second, the monster jumped at him, but he managed to put up a barrier and jump to the side. He shouted to Shell that he should run. At that moment, Rihanna flew forward in front of him and, swinging her weapon several times, attacked the monsters. He asked in confusion, "What?" "Rihanna." She stood forward and resolutely declared that she would not allow them to lay a finger on him. He happily noticed that she was unharmed. She turned around and asked, "Was he injured?" The next second, she sharply bent down, dodging arrows flying straight at the monsters. The protagonist turned to the pile of stones that the golems had lifted up, protecting the others. Varys shouted, "They must shoot and protect Mr. Hill." Everyone got out of the rubble and quickly ran forward, shouting for the princess. They dealt with the monsters on their way. And at that moment, Elvin, approaching the protagonist, apologized for the fact that they were late. He replied, "It's okay, everything is fine." The next second, a powerful flash of light flew very close to them. The Leviathan, opening its mouth, released it, and then climbed onto the island and crawled forward. Varys shouted. He even broke a large golem at once. After that, the protagonist said, "That's it. They will have to use that plan." Rihanna objected, "But it's too dangerous." He clenched his teeth and replied that he knows. But since the Leviathan came closer, then the chances are greater. She put her hand to her chest and asked him to give her his hand. After that, she took it and concentrated the energy. Then she let go of his hand and said, although she had little mana left, so he needed it more, she asks him to win. He clenched his fist and answered, "Okay." Leviathan concentrated energy in his mouth, preparing to attack. The others shouted, "Damn, he will shoot again." The next second, the monster was preparing to release a powerful impulse, but an attack flew into his head. MC riding Terran moved forward, simultaneously attacking monsters, shouted, "Leviathan, here!" He moved from side to side, and Leviathan, moving behind him, scattered sea pursuers in different directions. The protagonist shouted, "Terran, she must run faster!" The others called him anxiously. Varys shouted, "All they can do now is believe in him." Elvin jumped up and shouted, "No way! He is not going to just stand there." He grabbed a huge bowstring and shouted that we need to prepare the ballista. Varys shouted, "No. Captain, the winch is broken, they won't be able to pull the rope." He replied, "Their master is now risking his life for them. As a true warrior of his tribe, he cannot stand idle." He clenched his teeth and pulled the device towards himself with effort. After that, he looked to the side and noticed that Mappa had joined him. Meanwhile, MC told Taran to dodge. They met the Leviathan's gaze, and he noticed several projectiles flying towards the monster. He thought in surprise, "Orcs?" A ship was visible from the sea, from which projectiles were flying. The next second, a huge arrow flew into the Leviathan's head. Elvin, holding the weapon, shouted that he must receive. The protagonist shouted, "Come on, Taran!" She released a web from her mouth and, pushing off the Leviathan's body, flew forward. The protagonist reached for the bag behind his back and, lifting it up, thought, "Now the time has come." He gave the signal to full. At that moment, she was in the cave, swinging a pickaxe, shouted, "The signal has been given." "Well, that's it. 1, 2. The next second, the spider powerfully hit the wall. Cracks spread throughout the cave, the ceiling began to crumble, and the Leviathan, located above, began to rapidly fall into the cave. MC stopped near the cliff and said that they were prepared in case the ballista broke. They were digging a cave in a designated place. It was enough to just demolish the supporting columns. Now it must rest here forever. He took his pickaxe out of his bag and shouted, "Best job, Mappa! Mithril pickaxe!" The system asked, "Start digging?" He saw stones falling on him from above, and directing energy, grabbed it, pointing it at the monster. The system reported the excavation device received. Leviathan concentrated the energy in his mouth and then released powerful beams of energy. The protagonist at this moment resolutely flew forward, holding the pickaxe, and shouted, "He must begin, the king of the cave." The system reported the order was accepted. Begin digging. He swung the pickaxe and struck forward. He thought that he would put all the power of the king of the caves into this metal, capable of killing gods. The next second, a powerful flash of light appeared from the pit. Cracks spread across the ground. The others froze in anticipation. A powerful impulse began to pass through the body of the Leviathan, and the protagonist thought that it was definitely a direct hit. The goblins screamed, "Wow!" He hit the Leviathan. The legendary beast was defeated. The protagonist hung on the web hanging from above and shouted that they did it. Then he turned around and saw that the monster opened its mouth. He screamed with such force that the others grabbed their heads and screamed, "What is this? A death scream?" MC hung on the web from such a powerful sound and thought, "No way, the scream, damn, it is echoing in the cave." Varys screamed, "The cave is collapsing." Elven told Taran to pick him up. At that moment, Rhianna flew down and they screamed in alarm, "Princess." She stretched her hand forward and screamed, "Taran." She released the web, and the princess, grabbing it, flew to the protagonist and called him. She hugged him and shouted that he should hold on, they will pull him out of here. He looked at her in surprise and told her to run, otherwise she will die with him. She screamed negatively and declared that she will not leave him. She promised, because She looked up, seeing a huge pile of stones flying at them. At that moment, Ash appeared in front of her, their gazes crossed, and the kobold grabbing them began to quickly rise forward, jumping from wall to wall. They shouted in confusion, "What? Where?" "Ooh." They saw huge boulders flying at them, but he told them not to be afraid. At that moment, Hein pushed off the edge and jumped straight onto the boulder, destroying it into many smaller stones. After that, they went upstairs, and the protagonist thanked the kobold, asking, "But who is he?" Ash came up to him and said that he defeated the Leviathan, which means there are heroes among people. He thought in surprise, "Kobolds?" Hein said that they do not care about him, brother, but he can smell her highness on him. The protagonist thought, "So they." Ash thoughtfully said words of apology, and said that they would like to know something. He must say, "Have they seen a box with a small kobold on the island?" At that moment, the others ran to him, shouting, "Leader, princess!" Hein said, "Elven and Haris, they have not seen each other for a long time. He heard that their tribe was wiped off the face of the earth long ago." But Varys explained that Ash and Hein are from the Tiberius tribe. They are the ones whom Alcmena ordered to guard Riel. The kobold shouted, "So he knew their queen?" "So it turns out." At that moment, Full ran after Riel, who ran towards them. They cried out in bewilderment, "Her Highness!" She stopped, and the kobolds, with tears in their eyes, said that they were glad to see her in good health. They apologized for not being able to protect her. They were ready to pay with their lives for their mistakes. She looked at them in surprise, and Elven asked why they came. Ash answered, "It would be stupid to lie, but the boat they were on was sunk by a Leviathan, and they lost track of Her Majesty, so they drifted until they were rescued. Orc pirates come you from the Horde Corvus." At that moment, a goblin ran up and turning to the general shouted, "A boat is approaching the pirate ship." He ordered, "Do not shoot. Wait for his signals." Then he turned to the kobold and asked, "What does this mean? Aren't they enemies?" He replied that he needed to meet them. Their ship was badly damaged, and because of the shelling, they had no ammunition left. It would be very easy to defeat them. Therefore they asked them, as from themselves, they must pardon them. After some time, MC introduced himself. "He is the head of this place." He replied, "He is Kamu, the leader of the Corvus Horde." This battle was quite a surprise for them, but for an island inhabited by non-humans to be ruled by a human. The protagonist thought that he was very big, even for an orc. Then Kamu said, "He is a goblin, and so big, so he is Elvon, the leader of the Beldon tribe?" In response, he clenched his teeth and introduced himself, saying that this is his name now. They will help them, but old grievances will not be forgotten. Is he ready to accept their help, orc? He took up his weapon and replied, "Great. Since the Beldon tribe is here, then this must be fate." The goblins became wary, and he, putting his sword on the ground, said that he begged for the lives of his comrades in exchange for his own life. He knelt down, taking off his hat. The others, perplexed, asked, "What?" He added that he took full responsibility for what happened to their tribe. In exchange for his head, he asked that they at least allow them to repair the ship. Elvan replied that this would be the end of his life as their leader. One of the orcs shouted at him to wait. It was not their leader's fault. They were traitors. Kamu shouted that he should remain silent. Does he want to disgrace him even more? He replied that this was not so, but he did not want to watch him die. Rhianna asked, "A traitor?" Elvan shouted, "Silence." The others grabbed their ears. The protagonist, addressing the orc, apologized for interrupting, but he wanted to know everything. he should let him speak. After that, the orc explained that Cloud was the second in command and a traitor. He waited until the leader left for a voyage, then stole part of their fleet. He was always quite strange, saying that their leader's methods were too soft and that the Corvus horde needed more glory and honor. With his sweet words, he lured most of their comrades away. They set out again as soon as they heard the news, but Cloud had already fled, hanging their horde flags everywhere. The protagonist asked, so Cloud was behind all this? He answered that it was exactly so. Ash added that the Leviathan appeared in the middle of the battle. Cloud's troops were destroyed. MC said, that's whose corpses they saw. Varys agreed. It seemed so. After that, Ash closed his eyes and added that he wanted to say that Kamyu was the one who saved them. The orc said, it's quite funny. Their horde has always been involved in piracy, but never attacked other factions without an apparent reason. Kamyu dug his fingers into the ground and asked, so what? And what does it change? He clenched his teeth in anger and shouted, he couldn't prevent the attack. He couldn't suppress the rebellion earlier, so he is ready to take responsibility for all the deeds as a leader. The protagonist looked at him with alarm, and then Elvin walked forward and said, that's right. If he could unite his orcs, their home would be safe. He took his weapon out of its sheath and added, he will pay for his deeds with his life. Is there anything else to say? He replied, Elvan, warrior of Belden. He knows, dying by his hand will even be funny. The others became wary. Full screamed, father. Everyone froze in anticipation, and Elvin told Kamyu to take the sword. He, Elvin, the general of the Belden tribe, challenges the leader of the Corvus horde, Kamyu, to a duel. After that, MC thought in bewilderment. A duel? Elvin is strong, but his opponent is the leader of the orcs. He needs to at least cast a shield. At that moment, Rienne's hand touched his hand. He looked at her in surprise, and she shook her head negatively. Kamyu put forward his hand with the weapon, saying, Elvin, he is really ready to pay with his head for the death of his tribe, but in a duel, he swears that he will not take it from him so easily. He put his axes in front of him and shouted, shake hands. He is not going to retreat. His head will fall in the blink of an eye. The next second, they moved away a sufficient distance. Elvin threw his axe forward and then, pulling it in the opposite direction, it flew back. Kamyu bent down, dodging everything from the blow of the axe. Then he resolutely continued to move forward and knocked the axe out of the hands of his opponent. The protagonist was surprised. What? He thought they were too fast. What happened? Kamyu held the weapon in front of him and said that no one had ever dodged his sword like that. After that, he immediately attacked again, and his opponent moved aside, but the blade passed across his cheek, leaving a small cut. Rihanna said in surprise, wow, he is too fast, and his attacks are hard to predict. Mr. Kamyu is incredibly strong. Full put her hands to her chest and watched what was happening, terribly nervous. Then Elvon moved away, throwing his axe forward again. Kamyu felt the weapon behind him and shouted, how mean. Elvin looked at the weapon approaching him in bewilderment and shouted, what? His opponent shouted that he must choose what he will block, his axe or his sword. Then several drops of blood flew in different directions. The orc asked in bewilderment, what? The goblin grabbed the hilt of his opponent's sword, piercing his own hand through, and grinned, saying, he's got it. Now he won't be able to swing the sword, he must surrender. The orc grabbed his arm harder and replied that it was not so, he was caught. Let his condition not fool him, because he was an orc and would never lose to a goblin. He would break his arms. Those present continued to watch what was happening in amazement, and Elvon grinned in response, telling him to keep his jokes to himself. His words were true for ordinary goblins, but he was fighting him. A great warrior of the Beldan tribe. The orc, when he found himself above his opponent, cried out in bewilderment, what? Elvon lifted Kamya above himself. He cried out in bewilderment, how did he? He ordered him to receive, and then throwing him over himself, threw him to the ground. Kamyu hit his head, covering the ground with cracks. Then Elvin clenched his fist, destroying the rapier in his hand. The spectators of the battle shouted joyfully. The protagonist ran to the place of the battle and shouted, Elvan! The goblin ran to him and shouted, the leader! Then the protagonist approached Kamyu, who was still lying on the ground, and asked, is he dead? Elvin, smirking, said, the leader of the orcs is not so easy to kill. The next second, Kamyu said, he lost, they will end this, Elvan. He answered with clenched teeth, great. Now his life is his, and he is not going to throw it away in vain. Then he raised his axe up and shouted, did everyone see? The duel is over, they have won the war against the Horde Corvus. The goblins cried out happily, and then he turned to the main character and, awkwardly scratching his head, apologized for starting to behave like that. He replied that it was just like him, he was grateful to him. Then he leaned over and told Kamyu that he could stay on the island until they fixed their ship. Just then his people would be in order. Did he agree? He, rising to his knees, confirmed this and said that he accepted his offer. Then Elvin looked in surprise at Full, who, bowing her head, came up to him. The next second, she hit him on the knee, and he cried out in pain, and then was indignant. For what? She laid her head on his chest and said, she told him not to get so excited anymore. Meanwhile, Kamyu spread his arms to the sides and shouted for everyone to listen. While they were here, they would obey Mr. Hill. They should greet him. And so, hundreds of warriors of the Corvus Horde became their guests. But their large number made him worried. Ash and Heine followed the order of their queen and began to serve him as Riel's foster parent. Ash said, it seems the Belden tribe has accepted his command. If so, maybe he will give them new names too. He agreed. Only what they get in return comes from his mark. He does not know what the end result will be. Ash said that he only wants to protect Riel. MC said that from now on he is Ashton, and Heine became Highness. They firmly stated that they swear their lives. Then Hill sighed and said, it seems he is very busy, Varys. He confirmed it. He is checking the wounded and preparing new places to live. Then the protagonist abruptly sat down on a stone, clutching his head. Rihanna ran up to him and called him worriedly. He said that everything is fine, he is just tired. She put her hand on his forehead and noticed that he had a fever. She said that she would take him to the room. He should take care of him later, Varys. He replied, okay, she can rely on him. After that, she clenched her fists and turned to the protagonist, and he said that everything was fine. What was she? She said that he was working too much. She hugged him and apologized. He asked in confusion, what? Rihanna? She picked him up in her arms and carried him forward. He indignantly shouted, what was she? She said that everything was fine. She would carry him. He was indignant. He didn't mean that. Well, after that incident, he left the command to Varys, and he himself was treated and resting. After some time, they came to the remains, and the goblin said, wow, how huge he is. Lord Varys, maybe we should bury this. But the next second, Mappa cut off a piece of meat and then swallowed it. They, puzzled, called him and watched his reaction. He suddenly began to happily jump on the spot. The goblin asked, did he eat it? His comrade noted that he liked it. Varys, sighing, said, numbers 10 and 11 to him. So they began to freeze the cave. Who knew that a leviathan could be eaten? Then they decided that the huge golem in the sea should be pulled out. After that, the orcs approached them, and one of them asked if they could help them. They have boats, they swim well. The goblins handed them ropes and, agreeing, told them to tie up the golem. Although it will not be easy, but MC wants the Beldan tribe and the Corvus Horde to cast aside old grudges and begin to live in peace. His core survived, and all thanks to Orichalcum. It will be necessary to restore the body later, but first. At this point, Rihanna, smiling, said, and now, Mr. Hill. She was sitting next to his bed, holding a bowl of soup in her hands. He raised his hand and said that he had already told her he was fine, he could eat on his own. She objected. He would not recover if he did not rest. Then she smiled again, and, holding out a spoon with food to him, said, come on! He must open his mouth. He swallowed the contents of the spoon and thought that Rihanna was more stubborn than she seemed at first glance. But he was very grateful to her, and the medicine Varys made from Yggdrasil leaves was very effective. He said that she should not force herself, a little more, and he would have enough mana to recover. She stood up next to him and said that it was not a problem, especially since when would she have such an opportunity again? She shyly twirled a strand of hair in her hand and said that it was not difficult for her, and she did not come to him that often. After that, she headed for the exit, and he thought, so that's how it is. But to be honest, he doesn't like that he's resting while everyone else is working, and he really wants to keep digging. Meanwhile, the orcs were mining. One of them wiped the sweat off his face with a towel hanging over his shoulder, turned to his comrade and said, listen, don't you think this area is very hot? He was surprised and then noticed that it seemed like it. The next second, a powerful stream of water suddenly appeared from the place where he was hitting the pickaxe. They jumped aside and, perplexed, shouted, what, water? It's a hot spring. After a while, the protagonist grabbed the pickaxe and swung it, saying that everything was fine. The next second, he grabbed his side and cried out in pain. His body shook, and an alarmed Rihanna entered the room and called him. She sat him down on the bed and said that she had told him to rest for now. He apologized to her. Then Kamyu entered the room and asked, wasn't he taught that girls shouldn't be bullied? He smiled awkwardly and asked, were they all here? A rare sight. The orc took off his hat and said that he was just passing by. Rihanna was showing them the island. Turning to Rihanna, he told her not to forget, and she said, sure, he should take it. She handed the clothes to the protagonist. He picked them up and said, these are his clothes. Although they are pretty worn, they still look like new. She smiled and said that they were restored with spider threads, so now they are even better than before. He thanked her. Then Ashton noticed that the island was full of surprises. It may not be much on land, but there are many tunnels underground. Blacksmithing is very developed. Kamyu said, he has been to many places, but he has never seen Yggdrasil. MC spread his arms wide and said that he wanted to make this place even better for living, because he would be glad to any of their suggestions or comments. The orc agreed with him. The Corvus horde would make every effort, and they would be glad if he accepted them as residents of this island. Rihanna, apologizing, said if the Belden tribe did not treat them very well. He said that it was not their fault, but reconciliation would take time. The protagonist said that he agreed, and as for the attitude, he should not worry. They all obey him, a human. He thinks that they will soon forget all the grievances. He thanked him, and then added, but a human, the ruler of the island who is kind to monsters, how did he manage to create such a dominion? He awkwardly scratched his cheek and said that it was a long story. In general, he is from Sanfalas, and this island belongs to the kingdom of Sanfalas. But before he could finish speaking, Full ran into the room and shouted that they were in trouble. The protagonist asked what was going on. She leaned her hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath, and then looked at him and shouted, "Hot water is running straight out of the ground." After some time they arrived at this place, and MC looked at the hot spring in surprise. Varys came up to him and asked how he was feeling. He answered, pretty good, since he can walk and look at such a wonderful find. Elven came up to him and, smiling, said, "Boss, this is a hot spring. He already likes it." Full put her hands on her waist and looking at him, noticed that he was very optimistic. What if it was just a cave flood? The orc said that they were just digging, and then water started flowing. It doesn't stop. The protagonist asked, had this happened before? Full clarified, did he mean water? That's true, but there wasn't much of it. He thought for a moment and said thoughtfully, then first we need to make sure that the water is not dangerous. The next second he looked at the water in surprise, where Mappa was already enjoying the hot spring. Elven indignantly shouted that this was unfair. Varys added, everything seemed to be fine, and he had also checked before they arrived. The protagonist thanked him, and then, sitting down next to Mappa, asked him to tell him if there was a way to get all this water out. Varys approached him and said thoughtfully, if only there was a source at the top, like in the mountains, but from underground. MC said, it looks like it will be difficult. It seems that Mappa had a plan, since he quickly ran to the forge. After some time, he drew a plan with a stick on the ground, and the protagonist said, so he wants to use the workshops to make molds from stone and also iron. A little later, Camus shouted in confusion, what is happening? The protagonist threw a stone into the pile and said, a normal inventory. While everyone was busy creating iron pipes from a stone mold, Mappa was improving the hands of number 8 and 9. He looked at the golem and said, it looks like fire magic. Then the golem began to weld the pipes, and he said that he got it. It connects the pipes by melting it. A large-scale project to bring water to the surface began. Mappa and the others created complex devices to control the supplied water, so they will not simply waste it. They also built a huge bathhouse on the surface. He wanted to help them all somehow, but his life was more important to him. A week later, they finally brought the hot spring to the surface. Everyone gathered near the bathhouse, and MC, smiling, said, what a huge bathhouse. Camus agreed with him and asked, but where is the water? Then Varys called Mappa, who was desperately looking at the wrench in his hand, and explained that the underground device works due to the wind of golem number 10. He gave him a thumbs up and the assistant turned the valve. The mouth of the statue, from which water was supposed to flow, opened. Everyone froze in anticipation, sounds were heard, but the water still did not appear. At that moment, Mappa went behind the statue and hit it, after which a stream of water poured out. The protagonist clenched his fist and noted that this is an excellent job, although the design is not very good. Full sat down near the water and said, wow, water is filling up. Elvon stood behind her and said that he wanted to come here already. Camus extended his hand and said that he was offering him this right, the Belden tribe deserved it. But before he could finish speaking, he kicked his leg and thus threw him into the spring. Having emerged from the water, he shouted, what is he doing? And he, turning to the goblins, suggested enjoying the hot spring. He said that first, they need to wash themselves, they should not be like that orc. He was indignant, so he kicked him. After that, the rest were busy washing their bodies, and then plunged into the hot spring. Elven relaxed and sighed, said, how good. The orc agreed with him. Even relieves exhaustion. Varys thanked Mr. Camus for his help. Elven asked, is something wrong, or does he not like that he was praised? In his opinion, building all this is just the job of muscular orcs. He was indignant. Hey, he is insulting his beautiful body. The orc, addressing him, apologized, but in vain he talked about the muscles of their leader. He climbed onto the rock in the center of the bathhouse and, showing off his muscles, said that they should pay tribute to his beautiful body. At this moment, Highness held the basin with Riel and told her not to pay attention to them, Her Highness. MC, holding the basin, said, wow, the day promises to be fun. Addressing Shell, he asked, does he want to bathe too? Then Elvan shouted, Full, She should not swim in the bath. She answered, okay. And then the protagonist looked at her in surprise. She turned to him and asked, Mr. Hill? She thought he was here before everyone else. He looked at the naked girls and thought, what is going on here? After that, he shouted, Varys, why aren't the baths separated? He was surprised, separated, and he realized that he did not understand him and headed for the exit. At that moment, Rhianna came up and holding a towel, offered to wash his back. At that moment, the demon that appeared on his shoulder said that since the baths were not divided into male and female, why not take a bath with her? The angel on the other shoulder said that he should accept the difference in gender and not do that. But then again, what difference does it make when you have the opportunity? The angel and the demon shook hands, and then the protagonist hit them, sending them up. He shouted that he was a little dizzy, so he would come later. Everyone have a good time. Rhianna looked after him in surprise. Full, looking at her, called her to the spring. MC, walking down the stairs, said she really scared him, but he could go with someone else. To tell the truth, he wanted to too. But it would look more like he was mocking her. He went down to the hot spring in the depths of the island and diving into the water said, okay, this water is perfect. He then looked at the mechanism and said that he never would have thought that they would have something like this. Good job, number 10. And Mappa really is a genius. At that moment, Rhianna came and said that she knew he was here. He sank under the water in fear and then shouted in surprise, what was she doing here? She replied that she couldn't leave him alone. She smiled sheepishly and apologized to him. Everyone was so excited and noisy because they hadn't seen a hot spring for a long time. How could she understand that he wanted to enjoy it in silence, right? He must have said he wouldn't mind if she joined in. A little later, he met the greatest enemy he had ever seen. Right face to face, she dove into the water next to him and pointed her finger forward, telling him to look. He cried out in surprise, and she said, the ore shines through the stones like stars in the night sky. He thought he should calm down. He should check his inventory and calm down. He noticed that they had used too much iron. Then Rhianna called him sheepishly and said that she had something important to tell him. He thought fearfully, important? When they were alone? No, technically Shell and number 10 were here, but he was scared. She said hesitantly that she couldn't understand the feelings of the goblins of her tribe. He should forgive her. She knew how sorry Mr. Camus and the others were, but their home would always remain in their hearts. There was nothing they could do anymore, but as long as they worked together, ate together, and soaked in the hot spring, she was happy. The protagonist looked down and said that she didn't have to apologize about that. The past was always hard to let go of, but she wanted to continue to develop her tribe, right? That was good. She should look at the island. There were goblins, slimes, cave spiders, a golem, kobolds, one naked caveman, and even a human. They all lived together. She leaned her back against his back and closing her eyes, thanked him. He shouted in fear that she. Then he turned around in surprise and called her. He thought, that's right, she used up a lot of mana back then, but still continued to work. He looked ahead in embarrassment and thanked her for everything. After a while, she opened her eyes and scared, apologized. She lost consciousness. She looked in surprise at the protagonist, who grabbed the slime. He was there until he was boiled. After some time, maybe it was the effect of the hot spring, but in any case, he fully recovered. He held the pick in his hands and wiped the tears from his eyes. He said finally, he can dig again. Fool said happily, that's great. But seriously? Cry over this? Then Camus entered the room and, waving his hand, congratulated him on his recovery. He pointed his finger behind him and asked him to say if he had an extra minute. After some time, they rose to the surface, and the orc, throwing his hand behind his head, looked ahead and said what a beautiful view. Since he had recovered, he had a gift for him. He handed him a scroll and said, here. The protagonist, unrolling the scroll, asked, is this a plan of the port? Did he create this himself? He answered, at Varys' request. He asked if it was possible to build it on this land, but he did. In addition, he heard that he was going to trade with the outside world in the future. But there are no ships yet. The protagonist said, alas, but everything that was broken, they dismantled for planks. Camus pointed his finger at the ship and said that in this case they are ready to give their ship and. MC shouted in surprise, really? He confirmed this if he repairs the 2 ships that the Leviathan broke. Here's another reason to build the port quickly. Then Hill looked at the plan again and asked, so, what does the triangular symbol mean? Why is it written optional? He replied that he got a little carried away and made the port plan a little bit in a royal style, and everything that, in his opinion, cannot be built, he marked like this. The protagonist said, according to the plan, this is as good as a royal port. Camus asked him to say, he is from the kingdom, right? He confirmed this and explained that he is the 17th prince of the kingdom of Sanfales. Since he was a loser in everything, they decided to get rid of him. After he confessed to Rhianna, he can finally talk a little about his past. After that, the orc put his hand to his chest and apologized for such a question. The protagonist put his hands in front of himself and replied that he just wanted to say that this island is considered abandoned, and the kingdom will never even look here, so he should not worry about it. In any case, he was grateful to him. He would go discuss the further plan of action with Varys and Mappa. He agreed with him. Camus did not really like his design. After some time, MC was busy with construction. Camus was looking at what was happening in bewilderment when Elvin put his hand on his shoulder and laughed, said, "This is their leader." He was surprised. The mark of the King of the Caves, how can it do this? Amazing. He built such a wonderful harbor. The protagonist looked at him and explained that he could only lay the foundation for the port. Should he entrust further control of the port to him? Camus pointed his finger at himself and asked uncertainly, "To him?" Varys assured that everything would be fine. Rhianna wished him luck, and he hit himself in the chest and answered, "Good. They can rely on him. He will build a wonderful port." Then the protagonist added that he will give these glorious golems as assistants. He restored numbers 1 through 7 that destroyed the Leviathan. He approached the golems and said that he was glad to see them again. It was time to get to work. There was still enough stone to build the port. So he continued to mine in the pond. Full came up to him and noticed that he had returned. He should say, why didn't he use the mithril pickaxe? He was surprised. Why? He had enough of it now. At that moment, Highness, turning to Lady Riel, said that it was dangerous here. They shouldn't go any further. Ashton and Highness, their job was to watch over Riel. The protagonist, smiling awkwardly, apologized to Ashton and asked if they could take Riel away from here. Full raised her index finger and said, "So Highness, will he be digging with them now?" He confirmed it. He wanted to try. She, laughing, said, "And how does it feel for him to wield a pickaxe in his hands instead of a sword?" MC awkwardly called her, and Ashton said that he should not be offended by Full. She is still a child. He took a pickaxe in his hands and, going up to the wall, asked, "So you need to hit with a pickaxe?" She pointed her finger at the wall and asked, "Can he see it glowing?" "So there is something." He said, "That's exactly it." Highness is very strong and quickly dug to the bottom. And then Full decided to compete with him. The protagonist threw the pickaxe over his shoulder and said, "Can he finally do his favorite thing? He likes digging." Meanwhile, Riel climbed onto Ashton's back, and he, apologizing to her, said that he needed to get back to work. Riel put her paws on the stone wall and began to bark. Highness sat down on the ground and, laughing, said that he liked it. Much more interesting than he thought. Full sat down next to him and answered, "And there is always plenty of ore here." Then he turned to the protagonist and said that they found something here and they do not know what it is. Full said, "Riel, she should not go there." The protagonist approached the cabin and asked, "Is this a chest? Is it also orichalcum?" Full said, "He should just look at this. It is a coffin." She tells him. Ashton looked at her and said that then all this does not bode well. After that, he picked up the stone and noticed that such stones fell out of it. MC said that this is something new. He should give it to him so that he can look. The transfer stone instantly moves to other transfer stones. The distance depends on the size of the stone. He thoughtfully looked at it and asked, "A transfer stone? So what? Will he use it and move to another?" Full looked into the cabin and called the protagonist, explaining that there is a hole here, shaped like a stone in his hands. Maybe try inserting it. He inserted the stone and noticed that it really did fit. The cabin in front of them lit up, and Full leaned over and asked, "So? Where does this lead?" Ashton, turning to her, said that even if it really did take them to another stone, he wouldn't advise them to go there. She scratched her head and asked, "What if we send golems?" Highness answered, "Yes, but what if they can't work on the other side?" Meanwhile, Mappa thoughtfully approached the cabin, then went inside. The protagonist folded his arms across his chest and said that he needed to think about it. The next second, Mappa disappeared, and they turned around and called out to him anxiously. MC approached the cabin and said that he went for Mappa. The rest should wait for him here. Highness objected. He couldn't do that. But the next second, a magic symbol was reflected in his eyes, and the others seemed to be struck by electricity. Full looked around and was surprised. "And where are they?" The protagonist answered, "No idea." Then he turned to Riel and asked where Mappa was. After that, he again approached the cabin and said that he would go and check. It seemed to be safe. He asked Shell to call Varys. Riel jumped to them, barking happily. Full also, running into the cabin, said that she would go too. Ashton said that they, the guards of Her Highness, must protect her. They all climbed into the cabin, and Full said that they all did not fit. Ashton, turning to Highness, asked if he could go after them. He answered he would have to. He tried to get out, but noticed that he was stuck. Full screamed, "There you go." She was crushed. Riel began to scream in panic, and MC told her to calm down. The next moment, they all fell out of the cabin. Riel was sitting on the protagonist's head and barking happily. They started to get to their feet, And Hill, looking around the library, saw that he was seeing something like this for the first time. Full looked at the bookshelves and noticed that there were so many books. They were definitely still on the island. The protagonist looked down and said that he thought it was true. It looked like the place where he found the golems. Scary. Highness turned to the protagonist and said that he thought he had found Map and needed help. The protagonist told him to bring him. After a while, they came to Map, who was lying in a pool of blood. MC, starting to shake him, shouted, "What happened? Was he attacked?" After that, he turned him over and realized that his nose was bleeding. He looked at the open book lying next to him and, closing it, embarrassedly said, "Okay, they'll forget." Then he told Mappa that they needed to go back. They were worried about him. He got to his feet and followed the protagonist, and then turned his attention to one of the books lying there. He saw a symbol there, and Hill repeated again that they needed to go. Mappa threw the book back. After that, they approached the cabin, and the protagonist asked in surprise, "Shell, did he bring everyone?" Varys, opening the book, said in surprise, "What a wonderful find." The protagonist looked into the book and asked, "Did he find some interesting book?" He thoughtfully answered, "Unfortunately, he does not know what language it is written in." MC noticed that he cannot read it either. At that moment, Camus approached him and joyfully clenched his fists, shouting, "It was so exciting, Mr. Hill!" Teleportation device. A huge library, the remains of an unknown civilization that rest underground on this island. What an adventure. We need to explore everything here. The protagonist agreed with him and said that they would split into groups in that case. But they should be careful. What if there were golems here? After that, everyone went their separate ways, and Rihanna, turning to the protagonist, said that there was a book with pictures here. He looked at it and said in surprise how detailed everything was drawn. She added, "Very beautiful." He said, "Was this city here before them? He just found similar structures here before." She asked, "Is that true? And this mountain in the center, doesn't it look like their island?" Full, holding the book, asked, "Really?" As she thought, even the sizes were different. Rihanna laughed and she added that their island looked friendlier. At that moment, the protagonist approached Shell and asked, "Is something wrong?" They stopped near a huge statue, and Rihanna, putting her hands to her chest, said admiringly, "Beauty. This is a goddess, right?" The protagonist said, "Once upon a time, the people who lived here worshipped her. Even in the kingdom, there is no record of such ruins. Maybe no one had found it before?" Along the way, they extracted a couple of magic stones and heart stones from the remains of a golem here. But they still did not find any information about these ruins. Varys wanted to study the books from there, because he was counting on him. He said that he was not sure that he would succeed. Then Full noticed a wall on the side, and, taking a pickaxe, called the protagonist. She noticed that there was a passage behind the wall. They looked around, but did not find anything resembling an entrance. She asked if she could dig already. The protagonist extended his hand to her and thought that he did not feel magical energy, but the light told him that there was an ideal place. He said that she could dig there, and he would protect her with his magic. She said that she understood. After that, she swung the pickaxe and with a strong blow pierced it into the wall. She turned around and Highness said that was a good hit. She laughed a little and then walked into the space that opened up. MC congratulated her, and she picked up one of the stones on the stand and said that these were stones of change. And there were at least 3 of them. As the sun rose, she rose in her bed and, going down from the second tier, changed her clothes. After that, she went down into the depths of the island and, turning to number 15, said that they should go. No one cares about digging as much as Full. Every day she goes to the mines while the others are still asleep, and she is also the last one to leave. The protagonist worries about how tired she is, and he does not even know what she wants. After some time, everyone gathered at the table in a forest clearing, and one of those present asked, "Does this stone allow you to evolve?" Rihanna put her hand to her chest and, confirming this, said that she herself evolved with the help of it. Camus looked at the stones in surprise, and Full said that their princess used to be an ordinary goblin. Ashton asked in surprise, "Really?" Camus, perplexed, asked, "Is she really a princess? The princess of the Belden tribe?" And he thought that she was an elven princess who ran away with Hill. At that moment, they were drinking a drink, but from such a harsh phrase, all the contents spilled out. They shouted, "What is he saying?" They said that everything is not so. Camus replied that he was amused by how they reacted to his words. MC cleared his throat and said sheepishly, in any case, he did not expect them to find as many as 3 stones. He would give one to Full, after all she found it. Varys, if he wishes, one will be his. He looked at him in surprise and asked, "His?" He thought there were more suitable candidates for evolution. He replied that he still insisted, and besides, his mark of the Wizard King is currently idle. Camus shouted in surprise, "The Wizard King? It is the strongest mark." Ashton agreed, "It is very strong and useful, but if you find a use for it." Elvin, looking at him, asked, "He is already old." right? With evolution, he will be able to get a new young body. Full was surprised. What? Varys is dying? Rhianna shouted indignantly. She does not want to lose him. He said, alas, but he is really too old. But he still wants his mark to be useful to them. Mr. Hill, he asks him to let him use the evolution stone. With these words, he clenched his fist. There is only one stone left, but it does not seem that anyone wants to evolve themselves. Ashton said, and they can still use their marks. Varys asked, does Mr. Camus have a mark? He would like to see it. He answered that he does, and then took off the glove from his hand. Varys said in surprise, even so. The protagonist said he has never seen such a thing before. Varys added that it is a sea dragon. It allows you to control water. He heard that only Tritons can use it. The protagonist was surprised. Is this mark that turns you into a monster? Camus asked to let him explain. He does not want to use it. Elvin looked at him in surprise and asked, what? But according to the description, he would become an ideal sailor with this. He grinned. His jokes are funny. Monsters have disgusting slippery scales. He does not want to become like them. It will spoil his beauty. MC said, that's how. It is better not to force him to evolve then, and so they decided to carry out the evolution right away. Full stood away from the table and taking the stone, said that she was a little nervous. Princess, what to do? She clenched her fists and enthusiastically said that she should think about who she wants to become, and she must want it very much. She closed her eyes and thought about who she wants to become. Always, all the time, someone protected her. But one day she will be alone, and they will leave, and she is the daughter of the great warrior Elvin. At that moment, the stone in her hands lit up. Ashton, perplexed, asked what? Camus said no, it can't be. The protagonist closed Mappa's eyes and asked Rhianna. She agreed. At that moment, Full noted in confusion that it seemed to her that her arms and legs had become longer. Wow. It worked? Rhianna wrapped her body in a towel and asked if she wanted to see. Shell stretched out, turning into a mirror. Her eyes opened in surprise, and then she hugged the princess and shouted that she did it. She had evolved too. She hugged her back and congratulated her. Elvin said that it was not bad. She had become bigger and faster. But was she stronger? She put her hands on her waist and looking at him replied that he only thought about muscles. But for her, magic. Wait, magic. Can she use magic now? The protagonist told her not to worry. He sees flows of mana in her. So now she just has to learn spells. She looked at her hand and happily said, hooray! Although, unlike the princess, her skin color remained the same, she thinks. Then she looked at the princess and asked, then why did the princess become human-like? She also wanted a body in which she could use magic. She screamed in surprise and then, embarrassed, lowering her hands, asked, who knows? She thinks that evolution is individual for everyone. The protagonist thoughtfully said, maybe. At that moment, Varys approached them, holding a stone in his hands and said, so he can get a different body. Rhianna said, his turn. The next second, he lit up, and the others looked at him in surprise. After that, the smoke cleared, and he, looking at his hand, noticed, strangely, nothing happened. Camus asked, what happened? Why didn't he change? He threw his staff, and the others shouted, what? He happily raised his hands and shouted, his back. For the first time in many years, it does not hurt. He cured his back. Pain, it's gone. The protagonist said it was good, but what about his mark? His hand began to emit energy. Rhianna said anxiously, Mr. Hill. He agreed. The mana coming from the mark increased greatly. Varys said that he wanted to test himself a little. Although it was a simple spell, he wanted to know what it could do in the hands of the Wizard King. So fire. A magic symbol appeared above his hand, from which a powerful explosion occurred. The others tried to cover themselves and shouted, wow, hotly. He apologized to them in surprise. His appearance changed, and he said, the Wizard King's power is really great. It's a little difficult for him to control it now. The others opened their mouths in surprise. Elvin, pointing his finger at him, asked, is he Varys? He replied that he understood his emotions. General, he also never looked forward to the day when he could use magic again. Now he feels like he's rejuvenated. MC said that they were surprised by the magic, but his appearance? He said thoughtfully, appearance? The next second, Shell appeared in front of him, and he, looking at the reflection, grabbed his face and shouted, what? After that, he returned to his previous appearance and fell to the ground. The protagonist called him anxiously, and Full, coming closer, said, he became the same again. Yes, the protagonist had heard of such a thing. The mark of the Wizard King allows you to rejuvenate the owner's body to the age at which it will be easier for him to use magic. After some time, they were sitting in the room, and Varys said, so this is how strong his mark is. The protagonist awkwardly scratched the back of his head and, apologizing, said that this is all he knows. While he lived in the kingdom, no one wanted to show him their true abilities. He replied that everything is fine. Now there will be an extra reason to explore the mark. After that, MC left the room and thought that he was very smart. He was sure that he would fully study his mark and become a great wizard. After that, he walked forward and Full, throwing the pickaxe over her shoulder, called him and asked, well, what would he say? How does she look? He answered that it suits her and she, smiling, thanked him. The princess made this outfit for her. And now she will begin. She swung the pickaxe and made the first blow. She shouted in surprise, mana crystals? The protagonist said that since she found it, she can take it for herself. Mana crystals are used to increase the total amount of mana, only now they find less and less of them. He and Rian have enough mana, and Varus is already strong on his own, so the best option would be to give it to Full. But if she does not use magic, then it will be a waste. After a while, he pointed to the drawing and said that this is how they transform mana, for example into fire, wind, all thanks to magic circles. First, she needs to study all this to understand the basics of constructing magic circles. How is she, Full? She grabbed her head and answered, no good. Her head is about to explode, but he must continue. Theory is akin to torture for Full. Well, in practice, she is not bad. She used a spell, freeze. A powerful energy burst out from the magic symbol near her hand, and she, raising her hand, joyfully shouted, she succeeded. She used magic. Elvin looked at Map, who was covered in ice, and said, but the accuracy leaves much to be desired. The protagonist smiled awkwardly and said that for the first time it is not bad. Then he pointed the magic symbol at Map and starting to defrost him said, after all, she is still equal to his strength. Elvin scratched his head and said he was glad if it was so, but MC asked, is there something wrong? He asked back, does he know the game with stones? He confirmed it. He played it sometimes as a child. Full made him play it a lot as a child. He replied that he didn't think she could use magic, turning the whole process into a game. Yeah, he thought it was impossible too. Varus just told him something. Full kept losing to the princess, after which she was depressed and cried a lot. The protagonist said it was funny, but so what? So she evolved because of. He replied, well, although she is embarrassed to say it, but she doesn't like to lose, especially when the opponent is her best friend. Rather, it is called envy. After some time, the golems pulled the ship to the pier. Soon they built their port and dock. After that, they immediately began building ships. The Corvus Horde, although they joined them, were uncomfortable, so they wanted to leave as soon as possible. MC approached Camus and told him not to worry about finishing the port. They can sail away as soon as they fix their ships. In response, he thanked him and said, by the way, how about his trade offer? He replied that he agreed. At that moment, an orc approached them and told Hill to leave the sea trade to them. His comrade, smiling, agreed. They could definitely handle that. They couldn't wait to sail. The entire Corvus Horde was eagerly awaiting that hour. Then the main character folded his arms across his chest and said they would finally start trading with someone. He thought that for starters, they could sell gems from here. Maybe they could sell something from Yggdrasil too? They should discuss what to buy here with the money they earned. At that moment, a monster swam in the water. Meanwhile, the orcs were dragging logs. One of them, wiping sweat from his forehead, sighed heavily and said, it's okay. They'll soon return to their main job. His comrade added, yes, as a sailor, he longed for those days on the ship. The next second, the huge monster rose above the water and hissed. MC, seeing this from afar, shouted in confusion. What is this? The monster began to attack the orcs, and they jumped back in different directions. At this moment, Camus managed to run up and attack the monster on the head with a kick. He threw it towards the barrels and remarked that it was brave to just attack them. Then he turned around, and one of the orcs shouted, what is he doing? He should prepare for a counterattack. The monster was reflected in his pupil. Everyone screamed in panic, a leviathan. He shouted that they were fools. They should take a closer look. He doesn't look like him at all. Then another attack followed, and the orcs screamed in fear. At this moment, Mappa ran up and, swinging, threw his weapon. Camus, noticing this, took up his weapon and attacked the monster, cutting it into two. He pointed the weapon forward and said, the Orichalcum saber is really sharp, good work. The protagonist ran up to him and asked what kind of monster it was. In response, he told him not to come any closer. Then, noticing that the monster was still moving, he shouted, what the hell? His head had just been cut off. He replied that he would not die. It was the devilish moray eel. A huge monster with several heads appeared from the water, and he explained that he had only cut off part of the body. The whole body had to be destroyed at once, otherwise it would regenerate all the time. The next second, Full directed a powerful flame attack straight at the center of the monster. The others turned around, and she shouted that she would help them too. Then, she saw the monster and noticed that it was scary. She jumped from one head to another, running in the opposite direction. The protagonist raised his hand and shouted for her to run here. She, trying to get closer, asked what she should do. He was chasing her. Camus said that they needed to destroy the entire body. At sea, they would have immediately aimed all their guns at it and destroyed it in one volley. But the protagonist said that if they hit with a strong spell, they would hit the port. At that moment, Varys, sitting in the boat, thoughtfully said, Full did a good job distracting him. It's time to try out his new powers. He concentrated the energy in his mark, and, having created a magic symbol, used the flow. Several drops of water grabbed the monster's head. The others, perplexed, shouted, Ropes? No, it's water. The sea turned into a rope. Varys shouted, Mr. Hill. He opened the way for him. He replied that he understood. Addressing Full, he told her to use lightning. She replied, Now, and, having concentrated the energy, she shouted, Spark. Several powerful energies were directed straight at the monster, destroying it into many small pieces. She joyfully shouted, They succeeded. Then she waved her hand at the approaching boat. MC turned to her and said that it was all thanks to the two of them. Honestly, he didn't think they could do it so quickly. She put her hands on her waist and laughed, saying that she had been training for a long time. Then one of the goblins, turning to the general, said that they hadn't even done anything. He folded his arms over his chest and looked around thoughtfully. Meanwhile, the orcs, turning to Camus, lowered their heads and said that they were very ashamed. Even the leader of the horde, Corvus, did not know what a deep wound the Leviathan left on the hearts of his subordinates. Camus, looking at the sea, said, Ah, what a pity. He didn't think that battle would leave such a mark on them. Now they are afraid to go to sea. The protagonist said that he tried to talk to them, and they said that not only the Leviathan, but also other large sea creatures frightened them. Varys said, It's normal to be afraid. Full looked at him and asked, Doesn't he see this every day? Elvin folded his arms across his chest and said, He thought they were very strong and had fought before. They were good at looking their fears in the eye, so they shouldn't be afraid. Varys, turning to Camus, said that he could always visit his comrades who decided to stay and live here, but he thought that the warriors from the Belden tribe would be ready to go with him. He replied, Alas, they wouldn't be able to and didn't know how to manage and what to do on the ship. He apologized. The Corvus horde is a creature of the sea. If they stayed on land, they would die. The others froze in surprise. Rhianna asked, Can't they build a ship that even a Leviathan wouldn't be able to handle? Then his comrades would stop worrying. The protagonist clenched his fist and noted that it was a good idea. For example, make the ship completely metal. Camus replied that the idea was funny, but difficult to implement. Plus, it would be too heavy, meaning less maneuverable, meaning they could be easily captured. Full, throwing up a pickaxe, asked, What if we take orichalcum? It's light. Varys replied that it wouldn't work. For now, they could mine orichalcum from fallen golems in the ruins. It was highly compressed, and there wouldn't be enough for a ship. She thought about it, and the next moment, Mappa took a stick and started drawing something on the ground. MC turned to him and asked if he had an idea too. He saw the image and asked, A Leviathan? 2 Leviathans? Varys thoughtfully said that he thought he understood. After some time, they descended into the depths of the island, and the protagonist said, So that's what they needed. Wow, that's something. They approached the remains, and he asked, And did they kill such a monster? His scales could withstand cannon shots, and even magic couldn't take it. Ordinary weapons couldn't break it. He reached for his pickaxe and shouted, I don't care. He's the king of the caves. After that, he struck. Leviathan's scales are lighter than they look. That's why, given his size, he was quite agile, but even so, they melted down many mithril things into tools and began rebuilding. Camus and Mappa supervised everything, so their plans were gradually being realized. A frame made of orichalcum, planks made of Yggdrasil wood, and a ship's hull made of Leviathan scales. Seeing what and how the new ship was being built, each of the Corvus horde perked up. After some time, the sun was approaching the horizon, and MC, turning to Camus, said that it was time for dinner. He replied that he would come soon. They buried them. He apologizes, but that's all they can do. He replied that it was more than enough. It was hundreds of years ago. One young man was able to unite all the orcs tired of wars together, then went to sea with them. His name was Camus. The hero of the orcs, the genius who united everyone and created an invincible fleet, he had no equal in sea battles. So this name began to be passed on to the leaders of the clan from generation to generation. And when it was his turn to perform feats, even he could not notice the traitors in his horde. But he found himself again, and they, along with the rest, will definitely go to sea. The main character called him, and he clenched his trembling fist and declared that he wanted to become strong, to proudly bear the proud name of Camus. The goblin ordered his ally to open the gate, and the crowd of people were surprised by the large ship that sailed out from behind the gate. Full exclaimed in admiration, The ship looks so strong and protected. Ashton said that it is strong and has good mobility. He can't imagine that it is made of Leviathan armor. Heel awkwardly looked at the ship, and Rhianna said that the Corvus horde is very worried. Camus drew attention to himself and said that today they will test themselves and the ship, so they should tune in. The orcs fussed on board the ship and he raised his hand, giving a sign. The protagonist exhaled heavily and said that he believed in him. And then he shouted, "Forward number 16." Rihanna and the others looked at him questioningly, when suddenly the Leviathan swam past the ship and caused a big splash. The orc shouted that something is moving here. They looked at the monster in fear and asked what it is. The Leviathan swam out and attacked the ship with magical energy. The ship rocked and the crew began to panic. They were scared and shouted that it was Leviathan. It had come again. They wanted to get away from here. Camus ordered everyone to calm down and said that this ship would not sink. They must come to their senses and take a close look at their enemy. Leviathan turned into a golem, and the protagonist asked in confusion, was it made of stone? The golem took the form of Leviathan, and why weren't they attacking it? He asked everyone not to interfere. Camus said that the simulation of the battle with Leviathan was ready to begin. The orc said in confusion that even though it was artificial, they could not kill something big. Camus replied that they were proud of being invisible in the sea, but without battles, they were also nothing. He understood their fear, but he refused to give up. The sea was calling him again. He took out the magic stone and ran to the end of the ship and saying goodbye to his beautiful body. He jumped off the ship and fell into the water. Everyone watched him in surprise, when suddenly a magical glow appeared from the sea, and Camus, who had evolved, appeared from the water. A mark appeared on his hand, and smiling contentedly, he rushed to attack the monster. Leviathan released several fire attacks, but Camus deftly dodged them. The orcs watched their battle in surprise and exclaimed, "He is fast, as if he flies on water." Camus flew into the air and thought that he liked it. The body moves perfectly underwater, and he can also control the flow of water and swim at incredible speed. He swung his sword and attacked the monster, but he could not break through its shield. Camus exclaimed, "And he has good defense." Leviathan sharply attacked him and threw him aside. Rihanna excitedly called out to the protagonist and said, "No matter how he evolves." The monster headed towards Camus, and the ship began to prepare for an attack. The orc ordered to release fire, and exclaimed, "They are orcs from the Corvus Horde and will fight with honor to the end." The king's ballistas fired one charge after another, and Camus said that they were too late. He dived under the water, when suddenly the mark on his hand lit up. A water whirlpool appeared under the Leviathan, and it began to lift him into the air. Heel was surprised and exclaimed, "A water tornado swallowed number 16. Camus concentratedly said that things were bad, and he would have to ask the protagonist to fix it. Water began to gather around his sword, and he said that it was time to destroy it. He used the flow control skill and made a powerful attack on the enemy. The crowd of people joyfully began to shout over the defeated monster, and the orcs returned from the ship. Camus approached Heel and he praised him for his excellent work. He said that it was all thanks to his team. He was wrong, and he also doubted his crew, and this doubt put a heavy atmosphere on them. Camus apologized to them and asked if they were ready to go to sea. His allies began to wonder in bewilderment. He was still asking? What a stupid question. They would always go with him. Varys chuckled and said that this was quite a bold move. Wasn't he proud of his perfect body? Camus began to pose and exclaimed contentedly that his body was shining from the water. This was the new ideal of beauty. He turned to the main character and said that now he had the best ship and the best crew. He would definitely thank him for his efforts. Heel exclaimed. He would wait. After which he said that Camus spent a week testing and adjusting the ship. During the survey, they decided on the subject of trade because the day before departure they had a small farewell party. He made everyone from the Corvus Horde attend this. After a while, Rihanna and Heel came out onto the deck of the ship. He asked if she would like to join him. Rihanna exclaimed, with satisfaction. The protagonist added that he wanted to spend some time on the ship before they left. Rihanna was surprised and said that she didn't know he liked ships so much. Heel replied that he was more into boats, because that's what he came here for. She asked in surprise, did he come here on just one boat? The protagonist looked at her questioningly and asked, didn't he tell her? They even wanted to exile him with honors in the palace, but now they all live on Sheol, where nothing was supposed to be. He even likes it here better. Rihanna called out to him, when suddenly Riel started barking, and Heel asked what was going on. Rihanna said that her eyes wouldn't deceive her, and the protagonist noticed Kamia. He jumped down from above and said, so they were spending time alone on the ship before it left. He hoped he hadn't disturbed them. Heel awkwardly apologized for coming in without permission. Camus replied, but this is his ship, so he can be here at any time. After all, he only recognizes him. In fact, he came to tell him something. Heel asked, what about? Camus answered, about his home, the kingdom of Sanfales. The protagonist asked, the kingdom of Sanfales? His hometown, what does he know about it? Camus said that Claude's group betrayed him because he was hired by the kingdom. Rihanna and Heel looked at him in bewilderment. The protagonist indignantly asked, what is he saying? After all, The inhabitants of the kingdom hate monsters? Camus answered that he was telling the truth, and when he caught up with Claude, he had already been smashed by Leviathan. In the last moments of his life, he confessed to him that the kingdom asked him to subjugate influential monster tribes in their territory. They were promised a good reward and the support of the kingdom. They were going to hire him too, but Claude was against it and he would have refused anyway. Heel asked in surprise. His father gave such an order, but why? Camus said that his father was King Louis of Sanfales. The kingdom has an ancient history, and they were the first to expand their territories and become great. Perhaps hiring the Corvus Horde also serves to expand the territory. But he also wondered all the time. He said that he was banished here. Does he believe it? The protagonist looked at him questioningly and asked what was going on. Camus said that there are many ores on the island that are nowhere else and only the king of the caves can dig them up. Doesn't it seem to him that everything is not just like that? Heel asked dissatisfied. Does he want to say that he specially exiled him here knew about the underground part of Sheol? Why then did he keep silent about the real power of the mark? Why not tell and send more people here to explore? Camus said that he does not know, and these are just his guesses. But maybe there is something valuable here that I should not know about many people? Rihanna asked in surprise. Underground ruins? Camus winked at her and said that she was right, and he doubted him. He thought that he was pretending to be a fool and knew everything. But after living here, he realized that everything was wrong. Camus put his hands on the protagonist's shoulders and told him to know that he was the Prince of Sanfales, and Sheol was included in this. The time will come, and the people of the kingdom will come here. Heel thought about the fact that he left the capital and forgot. He just didn't think so, but thought that his relationship with the kingdom was in the past, but they are in the present. The next day, Camus sailed away with his horde, and now they will trade and reunite the horde again. As a gift, he gave them a repaired number 16. Meanwhile, he told everyone what he heard from Camus. Heel said that the culprit of the attack on the Beldon and Tiberius tribe was the kingdom of Sanfales. El displeasedly slammed his fist on the table and exclaimed, "They have no excuse?" Ashton added that it was not his fault, that it was what it was. Varys spoke about the treaty with the kingdom and asked how come he had not thought of it himself. El showed his muscles and said that they should stop complaining. Now the main thing for them was to become stronger and fight back. Varys asked if he wanted to declare war on them. Heel said with regret that he would not want to involve them in such crazy adventures. El smiled and asked Ko not to say that they now had to move out of here. Sheol was their new home. The protagonist exclaimed decisively. Therefore, now was not the time to be sad, because they needed everyone's help to win. Full smiled and said that she liked this attitude better. Varys added that Camus was most likely right, and the extraction of these resources was the reason for sending the protagonist here. In that case, they could offer them an exchange, and in any case, they had more interests in protecting this place than they did. If they made Sheol strong enough, it could bring wealth to the kingdom. This would show the worth of Lord Heel as a prince. But he did not think that this could be enough to keep them out of their internal affairs. Ashton said that they should become stronger so that the kingdom would respect them. Is that what he was trying to say? Varys agreed and Fulay asked in confusion what she should do now. Rihanna decisively answered that they needed to develop the island more. Haynes thought about it and asked what if they negotiated and tried to find out the king's true intentions. Heel agreed and replied that Camus and Rihanna had offered him this, but he wanted to find out for himself in the ruins of an ancient civilization. Varys put his hand on his head and said that if you think about it, they don't know anything about Sheol. It would be nice to at least decipher the books they found. The protagonist announced that in this case, everyone here would receive the status of a Sheol excavation group. Full wondered how it was different from a regular mining crew. Gil awkwardly asked if she really didn't understand. What was she even thinking about when she was digging? Rihanna handed him a bag and happily said that this was some provisions for them until they returned for dinner. The protagonist thanked her and thought about the fact that they were going to explore new ruins. His father had some plans for Sheol, and he didn't know about them, so they needed to find out everything. Rihanna saw them off, and Fulay asked how exactly they were going to explore the ruins. The protagonist answered that first they needed to avoid damaging anything here, so they had to dig carefully. He suggested exploring the part near the teleporter. He said that they were looking for magical energy and watching Riella's reaction, and after her approval, they dug carefully, and for the whole week, they still hadn't found anything. Exhausted, Hel sat down on a stone and said it was strange that they had not found a single passage between the rooms. Ashton said, but they could always teleport to the library. Since all parts of the ruins were very far from each other, it was worth assuming that they were also connected by a teleport, and most likely, they were destroyed there. The protagonist thought about it and asked, then, where should they start researching? Ashton replied for dinner and suggested thinking about it next time. Princess Rihanna would be angry if they were late. Heel said that he agreed, and that was enough for today. He looked around questioningly and called Riel. Where did she run off to? The protagonist went behind the stone and, noticing her, called her happily. He noticed her paws that were bruised, and taking her in his arms, Riel began to behave restlessly. Heel asked her to calm down, and Fule asked in surprise what happened here. The protagonist replied that she was trying to dig something up there. There were claw marks on the stone, and Fule asked them to move away from there. What they found. The protagonist said, in that case, he announces to everyone here. She hit the stone with a pickaxe and looked at it in surprise. Heel said in confusion, these are bird bones and so deep. He approached Riel, who was holding an egg in her paws, and Ashton said that it had petrified after such a long time underground, so it was no wonder that it turned into stone. The protagonist said that it had petrified a long time ago, but Riel was trying to tell them something. Ashton turned to the protagonist and said, it seems that the princess wants to keep the egg. Maybe they will find out her motives later, but for now they can only wait. After a while, Rihanna attached the egg to Riel's clothes and she barked happily. Gil smiled and asked, is this an egg holder? Is it not heavy? Riel happily jumped around them and the protagonist said that she seemed to be fine. Meanwhile, the protagonist sat in front of her and thought about how Riel didn't want to leave the egg and even slept with it. She even showed too much concern about it. He turned away from Riel and went to bed, when suddenly the egg began to glow. One day, they were walking through a cave, and Haynes asked if they could hear water too. Heel wondered if there was another hot spring there. Haynes replied that he didn't feel any increased temperature or a specific smell, but the sound seemed unnatural and came from there. He pointed deeper into the cave, and the protagonist asked, so he could hear water? Fule said that she personally couldn't hear anything, but Haynes' hearing was much better than theirs because he was a beastman. Heel asked, was it an unnatural sound? Haynes agreed and replied that it would be difficult for him to describe in words. He could hear the sound of water, but he couldn't hear the flow of it. The protagonist looked at him questioningly and asked if they needed to dig while Riel was sleeping. They followed Haynes' hearing and began to dig in that direction. After a while, the protagonist said that now he could hear water too. He hit the stone with a pickaxe and a passage appeared in front of them, saying that it was coming from there. Taran released a web and caught Heel. He looked at him questioningly and thanked him, because a little more and he would have fallen. The protagonist looked ahead in surprise and Fule asked what it was. He replied that it was a column that produced water. Haynes added that the sound was unnatural because it was man-made. If so, then they had found another part of the ruins. Heel asked how deep it went. Even with his vision, he could not see the bottom. Ashton asked that it was strange, because water always fell from the surface of the column. The protagonist agreed and wondered, but where was the source itself? He asked if Taran could take the source stone. Taran released a web and grabbed the stone, pulling it towards the protagonist. He took it in his hand and said, this is how it creates water. This is incredible, and now they can get water anywhere. Ashton asked, what is such a stone doing in the depths of the island? Heel answered, they need to explore the ruins further and go down. Hines began to look around worriedly and asked, what is this strange noise? The protagonist asked in confusion, does he mean the sound of water? Hines caught the sound with his ears and said that it was more like digging earth and it was coming from the wall. Heel looked at the wall in surprise and asked, mana? A huge source of mana is approaching them. Suddenly, the wall began to crack. The protagonist ordered everyone to leave because someone or something with a huge amount of mana is coming towards them. The wall suddenly exploded and dust enveloped their bodies. Heel looked in surprise at the monster that climbed out of the hole in the wall and Fule asked in fear, who is it? The protagonist was surprised and said, its size and strength, is it really a legendary creature? The monster looked at them and asked in fear, underground people? Hines asked in surprise, can he talk? Suddenly the monster's paws slipped and he began to fall into the abyss, calling for help. The protagonist called out to Taran and she deftly grabbed his paws with a web, holding them in the air. He exclaimed that they made it in time and needed to pull. A little more and they would fall with him. The protagonist clenched his teeth and asked them to pull a little more, when suddenly he ran away to the side. Fule looked after him and asked where he ran. He used the skill King of the Cave, stone processing, and his mark on his hand began to shine brightly. He began to create stones that lined up in a ladder under the monster. After the monster held on, Heel asked, is he okay? He can climb up the stones. Fule asked in bewilderment. They helped him. He won't eat them now, will he? Everyone was waiting for the monster to rise when suddenly its paw appeared on the edge and it climbed up saying that it thought it was going to die. Who are they anyway? The protagonist thought it was the Lord of the Underground Ruins, when suddenly the monster called them loudly and everyone got scared. Meanwhile, the islanders watched the monster from behind the bushes in fear as it ate a large amount of food. Royden said how delicious it was. Their food was delicious. He had been eating little and badly lately. Suddenly he choked and Rihanna asked excitedly how he was feeling. Royden washed down his food with a drink and the protagonist called out to him. Royden introduced himself and Varys said in surprise that he never thought he could see the one they tell legends about. Foles smiled and said, but he is a little different from how they describe him. Heel asked, do these underground ruins belong to him? Royden asked in confusion, ruins? If they are talking about that strange pillar, then it has nothing to do with it. It is actually from the continent of Earth. Heel asked again and Varys said that he had never heard of it. Royden said that on the hot Earth, when volcanoes erupt and rivers flow, all kinds of dragons fight among themselves for territory all year round. The protagonist asked, where is this continent of Earth? Royden thought and answered, somewhere in the east. He was digging a tunnel along the seabed for about a month. When he saw them, he was surprised and scared and then thanked them for saving him. Heel asked in surprise, digging the seabed? He fell to his knees, upset, and said that he had lost to him. Rihanna called out to him, and fully said that in any case she was glad that they had come to an understanding. She hadn't wanted to be eaten. Royden laughed and asked if they hadn't figured out yet how he talked to them. He projected his thoughts directly into their heads, a telepathy skill. Heel wondered if he could read their minds. Royden said that when they spoke, their thoughts followed their voices. He could read those thoughts and understand what they were talking about. Varys wondered how they understood him. Royden replied that his thoughts were simply projected in their native languages, so there was no problem with that. Fully asked in surprise, so was telepathy magic or the power of some kind of mark? Royden looked at her questioningly and replied that he didn't know if it was magic or a mark, but earth dragons could send and read thoughts with their horns. Varys asked, so his abilities are concentrated in his forehead? As expected from the most ancient race, and he has something that is not subject to them. Royden wondered what made him curious. That tree behind him, is it Yggdrasil? Hyle agreed and asked, does he know it? Royden answered that he does not really know and heard about it from legends and tales. It is more majestic than it is described. He called out to the protagonist and asked, is this continent paradise by any chance? The protagonist looked at him questioningly and asked again, paradise? Royden said that people, monsters, and all living things live together in the far west. He heard that this continent is full of rich women and nature. But he sees only a small island and it seems that he once heard something about such too. The protagonist said if he is about Barlean, but he gives too little information. Rihanna said that people and monsters are here, but it is difficult to call it coexistence. Royden was upset and said that the stories he had been told were lies. Varys asked if he was looking for a place to move to. Royden agreed and said that he had simply lost his way to end up here. But in any case, he was glad to see them. He reached into his bag and said that they would see each other again and that he would give them a present for the end. After all, he had walked his entire path, so he had many rare items and things. He inserted the key into the lock and turned the key flap, opening the bag. Royden smiled and added that he had lied a little because he was a traveling merchant. Keel was surprised and asked, he was a merchant? Royden rummaged through his bag and said that his business was flourishing because there was always a war on their continent. And at this time he walks and explores the world, selling things. He took out all the items from his bag and the protagonist asked in surprise what happened to his basket. Royden said that this is a special compressed basket from the stomach of one creature. It can store many things and they will never spoil or break. Rihanna went to the vase and asked, this looks fragile. Is it glass? Royden said, knives from horns and many other tools created from dragon parts. She took a large fork in her hands and could not hold it. Heel awkwardly said, he thought it was too big. Royden replied that they are for dragons, but what about this? He pulled out dragon eggs, and the protagonist asked in surprise, are these dragon eggs? Royden agreed and said, fire dragon and wyvern. Varys added, they are all flying-type dragons. And this is an ice dragon egg? Royden said, these are all fresh and they can cook them or eat them raw. The protagonist asked in confusion, can this be eaten? He thought about how it is normal for dragons to use the bodies of their relatives as a resource. It seems that there is nothing else to do in their situation. Royden asked in confusion, isn't it the same for humans? They can leave them and wait for them to hatch instead of eating them. The protagonist asked if it was true that they could hatch. Royden agreed and answered that only the first ones the children saw would become parents. Full happily asked, how about raising one dragon? And if it could fly, then it would be of great use. Heel asked that he would take 1 egg, but what did he want for it? Royden pointed to a tree and said, "A couple of Yggdrasil saplings." The protagonist turned around and asked, "Is that all?" Royden said that their continent was now a wasteland, but before it was a blooming garden, and he wanted to make it like that again, with the help of Yggdrasil, but he didn't know if it would help stop the volcanoes. Rihanna exclaimed in admiration. He had a good dream. Royden agreed with her and added that he couldn't wait to trade saplings of this tree too. The protagonist thought that this is how they got the dragon egg, and also bought a couple of things for Map. Royden put the seedlings in the bag, and taking out the bag, he said that it was a gift to them. It is made of the same material as his basket. True, it is a little dirty, but the properties did not change. Heel took the bag, and thought that this would greatly help them in future expeditions. Royden grinned and said that he hoped to see all of them as his regular customers. The protagonist thought that the merchants stayed with them for the night, and left in the morning, but promised to return. And also, he promised to become their regular supplier of various goods. After these words, he went to his continent, and after all, the world is huge. How many more unseen lands and civilizations exist that they know nothing about, especially here underground? Meanwhile, they stood in front of the column, and the protagonist exclaimed that they continue to explore the ruins. He thought that the water flowed through the columns due to special magic stones. So, if they followed this trail, they would find the entrance to the ruins. He said that they needed to go down, and therefore he was counting on Terran. Ashton said that they would get there themselves because they had no problems with it. Suddenly, Rihanna appeared in front of them and thanked them for waiting for her. She apologized for taking so long to get ready, and the protagonist said embarrassedly, and she was really inspired. Rihanna happily agreed and said that it was all because they allowed her to accompany them. Ashton added that he would go ahead and report if something was wrong, so they should follow him. Heel said that he should be careful, and Ashton deftly jumped from wall to wall of the abyss. The protagonist was surprised and added that it was impressive. He quickly disappeared from their sight. Full asked if Haynes could take her. He agreed, and she asked if they would be together on Terran. Heel and Rihanna awkwardly agreed, and he asked, "What is it?" Bull and Haynes moved forward, and she shouted that they will see each other soon. The protagonist told Rihanna to hold on tight, when suddenly he realized that she was too close to him, but it was for her safety. The main thing is not to think about anything unnecessary. Rihanna said that they were counting on Taran. In the meantime, he was sharpening the blade, and Rihanna, sighing heavily, called out to him. He asked if she was tired. She asked, "What about him? He always sits up late." The protagonist said that he just can't sleep. What did she say about the blade? Mappa showed him how to take care of it. Rihanna said admiringly, "It just shines." Is he worried about exploring the new ruins? The protagonist agreed and added that these ruins are what his father wants. Once he learned about this, he has truly never been so tired, because he knows what he is thinking about, even though they had never even spoken to each other. Rihanna was surprised and asked, "What was that?" Heel said that they had spoken very little, and even then, these were orders and obligations to obey, but he didn't care about him. His father's orders are absolute, and everything happens as he says. That's what it means to be a king. And even now, he wishes that he knew everything about the ruins of Sheol, how everything pisses him off. The protagonist looked at the blade, when suddenly Rihanna pressed herself against his back. He became embarrassed, and she asked him to go and reveal the secrets of Sheol and find what his father is looking for. The protagonist thought about how he only wants to dig, and for this, he is ready to reject his father and the whole kingdom. Now he knows that he can resist him. When suddenly, Tirana jumped into the abyss, and they disappeared into the darkness. Rihanna called out to the protagonist and said that she sees a light there, which means they are almost down. After a few seconds, Tirana touched the ground with her paws and looked around. Heel helped Rihanna get down, and she asked if water accumulated here. This place is in terrible condition. The protagonist agreed and hoped that the path ahead would not be blocked. He called everyone and asked where the others were. Foley shouted not far from them that they were here, and it looked like this passage leads deeper. Ashton approached the entrance to the cave, and the protagonist asked if they needed to go there. "Where is Haynes?" The protagonist approached him and noticed how he was moving inside the cave, making a sound with his blade against the wall. They watched him in surprise, when suddenly he came out from there and said that he did not feel any danger there, and it did not look like the passage could be blocked. He is big and did not investigate everything. It is better to always be careful. Rihanna added that then they better not split up and all go together. Heel and Foley agreed, and after a while, they were walking through the cave. The protagonist looked around and said, "Just think, this place is always under them. But who and why built all this?" Rihanna thoughtfully answered, "Probably people, because they saw a statue of a human woman then in the library." Ashton added, "It may be an unknown race, but it is not clear why they lived only on these lands." Full wondered, maybe because they decided to settle underground? Heel grinned and said that it is worth saying about them that they are underground people. Suddenly, someone quickly hid around the corner from Fulle, and she looked questioningly at that place. Heel asked her, "Is something wrong?" She said fearfully that something was moving towards them. Haynes said that he smells well, so she should not worry. Fulle noticed slimes and looked questioningly at this. Suddenly, the monster started running away, bouncing off the floor and down the walls. The protagonist said that they were slimes. He thought that they were scared of them and that they weren't that dangerous anyway, so they would leave them alone. Rihanna smiled and added that they had been living in the ruins all this time. The protagonist thought about how he had also found Shell and Mappa underground. He wondered what era he was from. He thought that he should know a lot more about the ruins than they did. Full noticed a passage and said that there was another passage there. Heel suggested that they go where the water was flowing. After a while, they arrived and entered a large room. Full said that it looked very familiar. Highness pointed to another passage and noted that he could hear the sounds of water from there. Suddenly, Shell got scared and hid behind the protagonist when he saw another slime. A heavy mechanical door went down and closed the passage to the cave. Heel looked back and asked if the exit and entrance were closed. Haynes started knocking on the doors and said that it looked like protection from intruders. The protagonist said that the door looked very strong, but a mithril pickaxe would do the trick. Rihanna called out to him and exclaimed that she felt a strong flow of mana from the walls. Black cube-shaped figures began to fly out of the walls of the room, and Heel cautiously asked what was happening and why the bricks began to fly in the air. It began to gather into one structure, and after completing the transformation, Fulla asked in confusion, was it her imagination, or were they aggressively disposed towards them? Suddenly, a magical light appeared from the structure, which was going to attack them. The opponents began to deliver massive attacks to them, but Heel stepped forward and took the blows on the shield. He shouted for them to be careful. These are the guardians of the ruins. He activated the ability and released magical lightning at it. The enemy withstood the attack, and they were surprised when suddenly the magic cube became stronger and the protagonist shouted that it was absorbing magic. The enemy fired a large energy beam at them and exploded. Heel dodged and said that he would convert the absorbed magic into his own power. Full asked, "Are they not allowed to attack with magic?" Suddenly, the shield collapsed in her hands and the enemy attacked her. She exclaimed, "He even absorbed the defensive magic." Ashton jumped forward and the magic cubes were distracted by him. Heel called out to him and said that if magic does not work, then they must hit physically. He ordered him to deal with the opponents, and Haynes protected them. Ashton said that the captain of the Imperial Guard, Tiberius, is ready for battle. He attacked the opponents, quickly delivering blow after blow. Rihanna exclaimed in surprise, "What speed!" Suddenly, the magic cubes approached the protagonist, but were immediately distracted by Ashton. Heel said that they all began to move in his direction and asked Haynes to help him. He told him not to worry, because he can handle it alone. Ashton deftly parried between the opponents, dodging the magic beams, and having dealt with the last opponent, he said, they also shoot. So they do not just attack together, but also coordinate their actions with each other. He pressed the swing of the blade with all his speed, after which the opponents began to collapse right before his eyes. He grabbed the crossbow and loaded it with arrows, hitting the target time after time, after which he exclaimed that he, too, will show them what he is capable of. Ashton made a powerful dash and swept away all the opponents with one blow. Heel watched him in surprise, and Haynes said that as he saw, he dealt with everything. He called out to Ashton and he replied that he was fine. After which he asked, "Are these golems?" The protagonist agreed and added that this stone inside them is their core. They float in the air, collecting magic around them, and he had never seen such golems before. Heel held out a magic absorption stone with his magic and exclaimed, "This is it." He used this stone to suck in their magic. The flight stone allows you to fly with the help of mana, and the black iron is made of metal that can survive high temperatures. Full took the floating magic stone in her hand and exclaimed in surprise, "It's true, it began to fly when mana was put into it." Heel said what it means mana, that they collect, use it for flight, and they are made of black iron to survive high temperatures. Ashton said, as he thought, "He feels something there." The protagonist said, "Then they better get out of here quickly," when suddenly the gate opened. Rihanna noticed the opening door and said so, and the protagonist was glad that they did not break. Highness stopped them and a golem rider came out from behind the gate. The protagonist noticed a heart in his chest and asked in surprise, "Another golem?" Full exclaimed in fear. "He looks strong." Ashton wondered what kind of a mixture of a man, a horse, and a knight was this. They had better not let their guard down. Suddenly, The golem spoke in an unknown language, and Heel asked what it was saying. The golem continued talking and extended its hand forward. The protagonist, confused, said that he had never met a golem that could speak. Fula asked if she didn't understand. Was it good or bad? Rihanna asked if it was the same language they saw in the library. Heel thought about this language and asked it if they were from the surface and if it understood them. The golem made a gesture with its hand when suddenly it turned into a sharp sword. Heel asked in surprise, did its hand change shape? The enemy was about to attack them from the air, but Heinz blocked the blow and began to hold it. The protagonist asked him to stop, since they came to him in peace. Their swords clanged against each other, and Haynes pushed him aside. Ashton attacked him and said that he wished he would just disable him instead of destroying him. Haynes attacked him again and again, but the enemy deftly dodged, striking back. He and Ashton landed on the ground and said that it was not that easy. Full asked, what if it was? She activated the ability and released magic directly at the golem, but it absorbed it and reflected the attack. Ashton said that he also had an absorption crystal. Fully apologized to him when suddenly a crossbow appeared from the golem's hand. Rihanna asked in fear, and what should they do? Heel activated the ability and erected a stone in front of him, which took the blow. He looked out from behind it and noticed how the enemy changed his weapon to a drill, crushing the stone in half. The protagonist was confused and said that it was very different from the golems he had seen before. Ashton assumed that they would not be able to catch it and activated Quick Step. He began to move quickly around him, but the enemy deftly attacked him. Ashton asked in confusion, can he keep up with his movements? He and Haynes were fighting the enemy, which made the atmosphere in the room tense. Rihanna asked in surprise, is he fighting them at the same time? Bull exclaimed, his and magic does not work on him. Heel came up with a plan to defeat the golem. While Haynes and Ashton fought him blow after blow, Rihanna understood the protagonist's plan and exclaimed, this can work. The protagonist took out an axe from his backpack, and Rihanna and Fule ran in different directions. Heel released Riel, and her eyes glowed with magical light. He noticed a glow that was moving along the floor and swung his pickaxe, hitting it right at it. Suddenly, an explosion occurred, and the golem was distracted by the protagonist. Water began to fill the room, and Haynes asked, is this water from the canal? The protagonist shouted for them to get away from the walls, and they retreated from the fight. Magic marks appeared under Rian, Fully and Heel's feet, and he used the triple freeze skill. The golem flew into the air before the ice reached it, and Heinz was surprised that the entire floor had turned into ice. The opponent tried to stand on the floor, but his feet began to slip. Heel shouted that he could not move so fast on the ice. Tirana released a web and tried to bind the golem, while Heinz and Ashton prepared to attack it. They began to strike it with blow after blow and flew past the golem, not noticing it. Suddenly, the opponent appeared between them and threw them with all his strength into the walls. The protagonist called out to them, and Heinz exclaimed angrily, he shouldn't have moved so fast. Suddenly he noticed that the enemy's legs had become sharp, allowing the enemy to move across the ice without any problems. Heel was surprised and asked, did he change his legs? The golem rushed towards the protagonist, and Rihanna called out to him. The protagonist took a fighting stance and ordered Riella to run. Suddenly, Shell appeared in front of him and the enemy stopped. Rihanna looked at him questioningly and asked, did he stop? The enemy jumped back, and Heel asked Shell if he was okay and why he stopped. The golem started speaking in an unknown language again, and the protagonist asked in confusion, what was going on? Why had his voice changed? Highness called out to him and asked to look at the insides of the golem because something was wrong there. Suddenly, the golem's armor opened and Nona appeared from there. They were surprised, and Heel asked, is this a child? The golem talked to the girl, after which she looked at them and asked who they were. Fool asked in surprise, did she understand them? Nona said that they should speak, and she should listen and teach. The protagonist thought in bewilderment, who was she? She came out of the golem in the depths of the ruins and very quickly learns to speak based on their speech. Nona took a step, when suddenly she slipped and fell on her back. Heel worriedly asked, is she okay? She again said something in another language, and the golem picked her up in his arms, carried her to the place where the water broke through. Nona understood and said that it was a hole in the canal. He spoke in his language, when suddenly a sound was heard throughout the room. Rihanna looked questioningly at her feet and asked what that noise was. The ventilation device closed the doors, and water appeared in the pipe. Nona stretched out her hand forward and called Argut. Magic cubes flew into the room, and Fule asked in fear, are these reinforcements? Nona stopped them and asked them not to attack the Argo. Heel was surprised and asked, is she talking about these golems? The Argo began to lower objects into the hole to restore the channel. Rihanna was surprised and asked, is she controlling the golems? Nona turned to the invaders and asked, What did they do with this Argo? She pointed to the broken magic cube, and the protagonist excitedly began to explain that he attacked and they had no choice, after which he apologized to her. After some time, Nona asked them about the surface. Heel agreed and said that they live there and call that place Sheol. He apologized, but the reason his father sent him here is because of the ruins here. The protagonist asks her to tell them everything she knows. Nona asked, if they are from the surface, does that mean this place is underground? The protagonist looked at her questioningly and she asked, are they talking about ruins? If so, then there are no people here. Ashton asked, but does she know what this place is? Nona replied that she had no information about the ruins. Heel wondered if she had lost her memory. He asked then who she was and why she was guarding this place. Nona said that it was her duty to protect these lands, and she remembered her duty. Suddenly Fully sneezed and Heel called out to her. She apologized for disturbing them and said that it was too cold here. The protagonist asked Non if they could go somewhere warm and talk there. She asked why. The protagonist said because it was too cold here. Nona asked why Shell protected them from her attack. Heel asked if she was talking about Shell. He was their friend and comrade. They had helped each other out many times before. Nona understood everything the protagonist said and asked them to follow her. The protagonist thanked her and asked how they should address her. She even gave the golem a name, so what was her name? Everyone introduced themselves one by one, and Nona said, this is what they were talking about, they can call her Nona. Rihanna said admiringly that it was a beautiful name, and Heel was glad to meet her. Nona called out to the protagonist and said that he had very strange abilities. He looked at her questioningly and asked, was she talking about his mark? After a while, they went inside the dungeon, and Argots flew out of the walls. Heel and Fulla looked at this with fear, and Nona said that they should not worry, since as long as they were with her, they would not attack them. Fully came closer to her and asked what the language she spoke was called. Nona answered that she did not know. She asked another question. Did she talk to anyone other than the golem? To which Nona gave a negative answer. Fully asked, was she really not lonely here? She said that it was not typical for her to feel lonely, and Rihanna noticed that she was starting to speak their language quite well. Full came to her senses and asked if they could show her the library that was upstairs. Nona said that she couldn't leave this place. Full awkwardly said that they wouldn't harm her, but only wanted to reveal Sheol's past. She replied that she had no memories, but she couldn't leave this place because of her duties. If she left her post, it would create a lot of problems. Full awkwardly scratched her head, and Rihanna said with a smile that next time they would bring the books here. After a while, they came to a large door, and Nona said that they had arrived and would now open the door. Haynes caught a smell with his nose and said that it was not very pleasant and similar to something. Nona cast a spell, and the door in front of them opened, blinding them with bright light.